Thank you. Thank you for your patience as we just ended another meeting. Let me call the Fairfield Board of Education to order for Tuesday, June 10th, 2014, for our regular meeting. Present is Mrs. Lou McCormick, Mr. John Convertito. Ms. Carnell is not able to make it tonight, and Mrs. Gerber, myself, Philip Dwyer, Mr. Fadavine, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, Mr. Llewellyn, and Mr. Patton are all present. And there we go. And Mr. Motor is present. Mater, as the, at the moment, sole representative of the entire student body. If I could ask you to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. For the regular attenders at Board of Ed meetings, you might have noticed that we've moved the tables in a little bit so that perhaps I have a better chance to see everybody and whatnot. And therefore, the presentations as well as public speaking will happen from the center table, as is more customary for the Board of Finance. We'll experiment with this, and if it works, it works. If it doesn't, we'll try something else. We started early tonight because we wanted to do some student and group recognition. We always have the superintendents and the CABE Award winners presented at a special event, and almost invariably there are some students who can't attend that date, and so we recognize them here at a board meeting. And then we want to recognize the Reflections winners who are able to make it. A comment just before that, though. I was at a Coaches Award dinner, and we had Kimberly Longobuco, Chris Parisi, and Dave Schultz, all won awards from that group. And we know that Gary Rosardo, Dr. Rosardo, was recently recognized also. That our students perform very well, but they get coached very well by our staff. And while tonight is all about the students, I wouldn't want to not make notice that we do have staff members who are dedicated to the success of students, and these are just examples of 4 of them of the balance of our staff, and so we extend our congratulations to them as well. So we will be doing this from up front, and so I think Dr. Teitel, myself, and Jessica will come up front to do the 2 recognitions. So, sure, why not? Why not? Therefore, Dr. Teitel will start.
This is new.
No podium.
Okay, no podium. So we had 4 students from Fairfield Ludlow High School who were unable to make the May Award because of the concert. And every year, there's always a conflict with something. There's so many things going on in the school district. So I'm going to ask the winner to come up along with the representatives from the administration who are here. And we're going to start with the Superintendent's Awards. Ellie Schroeder from Warner House, please come forward. She's not here yet? Okay. Okay, we'll go on to the next person. Maybe Ellie will come before we finish. So Pauline Blatt. All right. We have a winner. Thank you. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Pauline. Pauline is president of the Math Honor Society and among the top students in her class. She's from Webster House. She's involved with the community and volunteers at Wakeman, Keystone Club, and Summer Camp Counselor for the Fairfield Rec Department. She is the co-president of the Teens for Tolerance Club, which organizes events in school to promote optimism and tolerance. She is a Ludlow leader and a volunteer leader of Unified Sports. She is captain of varsity volleyball and varsity basketball teams. Pauline is the kind of person who can make change happen. She is a thinker and a doer, is passionate about and committed to the activities she is involved in. Pauline is someone who will make a difference to the people she's around. She's a true leader in all realms, in the classroom, on the court, and in the community. Congratulations, Pauline. Right. There you go. Okay. Right. Come on up. We'll do the photos now. Okay. Yes.
Thank you.
Congratulations. From White House, Kevin Wharton. Kevin is a College Board commended student, a CIAC State Scholar Athlete, and one of the top-ranked students in the class. He volunteers for Special Olympics and numerous other organizations. Kevin was the winner of the Hugh O'Brien Youth Leadership Award in grade 10. He captained this year's cross-country team and is a Western Regional All-State winner for 4 years in a row. He was the only sophomore accepted into Close Harmony a cappella group, and that is saying something. Congratulations, Kevin.
In case your fan club is here.
I apologize for my dress.
And we have a CABE Award winner. This is the Connecticut Association of Boards of Education Award winner, Jacob Garrell. Jacob. Jake is an intelligent, focused leader. He is the definition of a well-rounded student. What makes Jake special is that he's been involved in so many different activities. Jake has been the captain of both our football and rugby teams. He is a member of the National Honor Society and has taken a rigorous course load. Plays trumpet in the wind ensemble. One of his biggest accomplishments, he was awarded an Eagle Scout earlier this fall. Jake's been working hard since elementary school to reach this goal. He has volunteered hundreds of hours in the community, has taken trips across the country to earn this merit. Jake also has been volunteering countless hours as the president of our Save the Children Club, whether it is building a home to become an Eagle Scout, studying for an AP test, playing the trumpet in the wind ensemble, or practicing for the next big game. Jake puts 100% into everything he does. He possesses a great work ethic and passion to make a difference. Congratulations. Congratulations. Okay, yes, we'll have just a brief tribute to Ellie Schroeder, and we'll make sure she gets her award. Although if she wants a picture, I'm happy to come over to Ludlow and pose. Ellie is a member of 3 honor societies and received the AP Scholar, the Brown University Book, and the Spanish Achievement Awards. As a member of the Amigos de las Americas, she traveled to Panama, lived with a host family for 6 weeks, and ran extracurricular activities for the elementary school there. She also organized community members to refurbish the school kitchen. She will be a member of the training staff for this group this coming year. She offers tutoring in math and is the advertising chair for the senior class. Ellie is a very dedicated student and earned a score of 5 for both the U.S. history and language exams. So congratulations to Ellie as a representative from Warner House. Thank you all.
From time to time, board members or community members suggest a student group. The Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance will generally recognize those student groups who are successful on the athletic fields, and the Board of Ed has generally recognized other student groups. So there's a group of students who attended something called Reflections, which gives them an opportunity to display through some art form, whether it's poetry or song or film or just dance or story, on the theme of the year. And so we are proud of the fact that a lot of students were recognized through this PTA program called Reflections, and wanted to give recognition to them, and so Jessica will call them up and say a little bit about them or whatever.
Okay, I think what I'll do is I'll just announce everyone's names, and then if you could all come up, we could do a group picture with everyone. So we had 8 first place.
So we have one official group photo, but for those parents here who want to play paparazzi, we'll keep everybody here long enough.
Okay. Okay. Well, there were 8 first place winners for Reflections, and I believe 7 of them, or no, I'm sorry, 6 of them are here this evening. So we have from Fairfield Ludlow High School, Monique Laflamme. Yes, and she finished in first place with her photography project called Illuminating. We have Kiara Burns. Maybe just when they're all after, yeah. Kiara Burns, also from Fairfield Ludlow High School, first place for dance, and her piece was called I Am a Dancer. Alexis Maresca, also from Fairfield Ludlow High School, first place in film for Breakaway. Liam Farrell, also Fairfield Ludlow High School, first place for music for his piece Flight. And we have Lily Garby from Fairfield Ward High School, first place Visual Arts, Ducks on a Pond. And from Roger Ludlow Middle School, we have Danielle Hazelton, first place Film, Believe, Dream, Inspire. We also had a winner from Tomlinson, Christopher Becker, first place Photography, and Reed Martinson from Riverfield Elementary School, first place Photography for his Treehouse project. So if you could all come up, we could have a group photo.
Now, the photographer, the official photographer, is that direction? Yeah. And then we'll work our way this way. Is everybody, can you see everybody? Okay, so now. Again, another round of applause. So on to more student recognition. Mr. Mader, you are the sole representative, and perhaps before you say anything, I first would thank you for your year of service here, and please pass on to your colleagues our thank you. Or you can tell them that after graduation, they can come to our June 24th meeting and get it personally. But if not, please pass our thanks on to them, and the whole board joins me in that. So what do you have to tell us at the end of the time?
I'll just try to keep and wrap everything up for the year. I know it's our last meeting together. Graduation is quickly approaching. Now only 8 days away, surprisingly enough. And I know I'll tell you what our student body is currently up to in these final few days of school. Recently, our spring sports season came to an end with a wide variety of achievements as always. Our girls tennis team won the state NFCX championship this year, as well as our boys baseball team secured their second regular season Central Division championship in school history. I know as I speak for Ward 2, I know Ward's baseball team won the FCX championship this year for the first time, so I congratulate them as well. Also in the boys tennis, Connor Doyle and Alex Slobin were named first team All-State. Currently our senior class is on their internships, learning about what they might want to explore in the future. Many seniors are working all over town in various small businesses and further, gaining knowledge in whatever field they may pursue in college, or now learning what they might want to major in college because of how much they enjoyed their internship. Yesterday, our senior class also received our yearbooks and got a chance to reflect on the 4 years they have had in high school, as well as their long journeys from as freshmen, not knowing where they are in the school, to knowing the school inside and out. As before mentioned as well, next Wednesday's graduation is, and as always, we hope for great weather to enjoy such an important moment in our lives. Hopefully not in the upper 90s like a few years ago, but good enough weather to enjoy the ceremony as we depart from Fairfield Ludlow for possibly the final time. Our senior class will have one of the highest graduation rates in the state again this year, as we will be sending our students off to some very prestigious colleges, as we do every year. I do not currently have the list of students in front of me and what college they will be attending, but from the various names rattled off in the hallways about where everyone will be attending, there's the likes of Columbia, Yale, and Harvard, as well as the always popular in this area, University of Connecticut, that is always consistently mentioned. When I came to Fairfield Ludlow Middle School 4 years ago, my class size was in the mid to upper 300s. At the time, it was the largest class ever to enter Fairfield Ludlow High, but what I've heard each year, more and more students flock into our school, which makes my 2010 freshman class look tiny of sorts. I guess the initial thought might be that with all the new students coming in, there may be new conflicts that arise, but I view it as more students with all sorts of new talents and capabilities that could put Fairfield Ludlow on an even higher pedestal with the great other schools in the state, and I'm sure that is the way it will be with all the future classes entering Fairfield Ludlow. For the final time, I thank you again, and I'm sure Ethan would thank you if he was here too, and my best wishes for the future success of Fairfield Public Schools.
And what will you be doing this summer or fall?
I'm going to be working on the summer, but I will be attending Florida State in the fall.
Questions for our student representative? Questions? Questions? Okay, well, thank you very much. We expect you to stay through the very end of the meeting for the first time, or leave at your pleasure. Now, we're about to go into public comment. For those who are unaccustomed to our board meetings, if you feel like you want to take off and enjoy family time, feel free to do so. You don't have to sit through all of our board meeting, as much as I joke about that. But do so quietly so that we can move on with our meeting. Again, we've moved public comment to the beginning. The same rules apply. State your name and address. 2 minutes on non-agenda items. Any item that is up for action or on the agenda, you save for the time that we are taking action. Do we have members of the community that wish to address the board at this time? Please step forward. And the microphones are on, so just take a seat and say hello. State your name and address.
It's so new. Kelly Crisp, 194 Paper Mill Lane, Fairfield. You know, today we had yet another school shooting, and according to Senator Blumenthal, that makes 74 school shootings since Newtown. I imagine that each school district said to themselves, it'll never happen to us. It doesn't happen to people like us. It happens someplace else. And I've been passionately advocating for an online reporting system since this fall. The online reporting system came up at the board table in 2013, June 2013. The online report, as an update, the online reporting system is now tabled until the fall, when discussions will begin again. I've been on the school climate district team since its inception in 2012. I still don't know what we're waiting for. I just don't. The cost is not prohibitive, and in fact, I've pledged on my reputation to raise the money. It's only $220 per school for the first year and $150 for the second year and going forward. Not only would it provide the community, the parents, staff, students, with a means to report safety threats and safety incidents, but it would also standardize our ability to respond to those incidents. Right now, we have 17 schools, and they all do it differently, and no one really knows exactly how they do it. I'm really at a loss because I want to have a conversation about this. I want to understand what the challenges are, what the obstacles are, what the fear is. I made a formal presentation in April, and I still don't know what the fear is. And maybe we're so afraid that we're not even able to voice what we're afraid about at this point in the school district. So I'm asking you today to please actively support an online reporting system. Please find the funding. If you don't want to find the funding, I've got parents lined up willing to write checks. $220, I'll write a check. I want you to not let this fall through the cracks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have other members that wish to address the board at this time? Going on. Okay, thank you very much. We have two presentations tonight, short, I am told. I've been promised. One is on the Fairfield-Ludlow project, which we will not be taking action on today, but we will be taking action in June 24th meeting to keep in line with the state approval process. This is a project that we've approved in the past, but there have to be reapprovals at different time periods. And then a presentation on the AP Psychology curriculum and text. And again, that's a presentation, and the action item will be for the June 24th meeting. So the liaison to the Fairfield-Ludlow project is Mrs. Gerber. Do you have any opening comments that you wish to make?
No, just that the board has all received information, giving the history of the project and also the FAQs that went out to the other town bodies last year when the project was going through the approval process. So hopefully you have a good base in terms of understanding where this project originated from and why it's necessary. And tonight we have Mr. Costa from Perkins Eastman, and we have the chair of the building committee, Mark Donald, and I'm sorry, I am blanking on your name. Do you want to come up too? So in any event, I guess if they should come up to do the presentation now, correct?
Please join us,
Yeah.
and we had,
The projector?
If you don't mind, can that get turned on?
Okay.
Or we have our own projector if that's faster.
No, probably. We've got to hook it in, though.
okay,
So we just use ours?
If you want to use yours, go ahead.
whichever is quickest so that we don't have to dismantle this and remantle
Yeah,
it.
then I think ours would probably.
Okay.
Just in front and move away.
Okay, so we're expecting about an 8 to 10 minute presentation, and then there'll be time for questions.
Join us, or you're the EV guy. I think we're okay.
Yeah.
So you don't need the remote up here?
No, we're going to just sit here.
It's not hooked up to
I need to dim the lights, it's high. Turn the lights off near the.
Move this forward a little bit.
You want to move the table?
Yeah. Good.
So making you work here.
That's good.
Good evening, everybody. For the record, I'm Joe Costa, a principal and architect with Perkins Eastman out of Stanford. I have with me another principal of design, Mark McCarthy. He also works with us in Stanford. Tonight, we're going to do a very brief overview of where we are in the project. We are heading towards the end of our construction document phase. Within the next 3 to 4 weeks, we'll be submitting the project to the Office of School Facilities for permission to go to bid. We are going to be coming in front of this board on the 24th, I believe, to get an EDO 42 sign-off to give us permission to bring the project to the OSF. And project's been going very well. We've been meeting on a regular basis with the building committee and working closely with the construction manager, Gilbane, and the program manager, Arcadis. And as of Monday, yesterday, we actually received permission to go to bid on the roof job. Remember, about a month or so ago, we were in front of this particular board talking about the roof. We've subsequently submitted that to OSF. We went to local review, and we've gotten permission to go ahead and bid that project. So as we speak, that project is in bid, and we're hoping to get very good numbers on that project. And we'll be doing a portion of that this summer, and then the remaining portion the following summer. So tonight, we're not going to talk too much about the roof. We do have it as part of our presentation. Let's see if I can move this a little bit. What we're going to do tonight is really focus on the classroom addition, the cafeteria addition, talk a little bit about landscape, and then just review some of the dates of the schedule. So roof. Pretty much, we're going to be replacing all of the roof except for a portion of the roof that was damaged during a storm and recently replaced. I think you guys all know that. There it is, a blow-up. It's not a simple roof. There are many, many components to the roof, many different slopes, many different heights, but it is going to be completely replaced by the time we're done. I'm going to ask Mark to talk about the classroom design, and then we'll go into the cafeteria.
Thanks, Joe. So, not sure if this is on. We'll look very briefly at the two additions that we're making to the building. One is the classroom wing at the end of the Webster Hall, and the addition to the cafeteria. So go this.
The middle. Just hit the, you ready?
It's not working.
You want, no,
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
So this is where we're adding 4 new classrooms and two, there's 6 new classrooms? Well, we'll go
Four
through it by floor.
classrooms,
4
two.
classrooms and 2 science labs, 2 chemistry labs. So it's a little bit of a split level, or it's a 3-story, but you'll see that there's partial ground floor and a partial 3rd floor addition. But on the middle floor, we have 4 new general purpose classrooms. If you go to the next slide, you see that the top floor has 1 chemistry lab and actually a roof area. So the way that the massing of the addition works, the corridor could access to that roof, as well as a new egress stair. These are just our technical drawings, but we worked a lot in trying to make this addition the most economical and most efficient. So what you see on the right-hand side is on the lowest level, there's a science lab, but actually an unexcavated area to the building, then the 4 classrooms in the middle, and the additional science lab on the 3rd floor. So it looks a little bit like this in cross-section. So that really, we're really working with the slope. If you're familiar with that part of the site, it slopes fairly, there's a fairly good amount of slope between the entry drive and the road that takes you to the parking in the back of the school. So this is from our landscape architect, how that addition will move out forward of the building, which will displace a few of the parking spaces, which we will recreate a little bit further down the driveway and then come back and re-landscape that area. It'll also be an egress area for students in emergency situation, so a little bit of sidewalk work and some steps to take you down to the driveway. This is just, there's one particular part that we had studied, because in order to fit that addition in, and that shows the condition between the building at that corner condition between the sidewalk and the entry drive. So this is what the massing of the building is. So really on the classroom addition, we're trying to do something that really seems seamless with the existing building. So in terms of the brick material, a lot of the way the windows work, really fitting in nicely with the existing wing of the building.
Say something about the stair.
Yeah, thanks. As well as the stair, so if you remember from the plans, there's a new stair that'll be at the end of the corridor. So in order to bring light into the corridor and to make a nice moment at the end of the building as you approach through the drop-off area, we added some more windows and glazing at that particular area, and that's also an egress point at the midpoint between the lowest level and the mid-level. So the cafeteria addition we'll look at, which is towards the back of the building. So part of our scope is to do some interior renovation of the existing cafeteria, including a new seniors lounge. I'll use the pointer here. So we'll renovate the dining area, the existing dining area here. We'll create a new senior lounge here, which is currently in this portion of the building. A new office for a student newspaper and yearbook, and a new faculty lounge. So this is all renovated area in the school, and then we create some new storage area where the current student lounge is. So, and in addition to that, we will add to the building in order to increase some of the seating capacity. We'd like to get to, I believe, about 3 lunch periods.
550 seats.
Right, 515 seats is the capacity for the cafeteria. That will allow the school to have lunch in 3 periods during the middle of the day. It also will add some nice features to the cafeteria. Currently, I think because the cafeteria is quite kind of utilitarian at the school, the students choose to take their lunch elsewhere. We'd like to be able to have a really well-designed cafeteria for them to not only to have lunch, but be able to socialize and to continue their school day and work together. So you'll see how that works. Excuse me. Just a blow-up of that area. So one of the things which you'll see in the renderings, because that area outside of the school is a few feet lower than the existing floor, we're actually setting the part of the new addition at a lower level. This kind of makes a nice division between spaces, so there'll really be some choices for the students in terms of where they want to take lunch. This also will act as a nice multi-purpose space for after-school activities and for the community to use as well. And this is what I was talking about in terms of the new faculty lounge, which will seat about 50. A new office for the student newspaper and yearbook, and the senior lounge, which is directly adjacent to the expanded cafeteria. We're also, although it's quite tight fit in there, we're not displacing any of the parking in the back, so we'll really fit the building in to that green space between the existing building and the parking area, but also adding some landscape features there. So we'll come back, re-landscape the area around this addition, and create a nice plaza just outside of the dining room. So in case this is used, I don't think we see this as an area that they'd be using on a day-to-day basis for the school, but certainly if that space is used for functions at the end of the day or after school or on the weekends, you could access directly into the expanded cafeteria, and you don't necessarily have to come through the whole building. This is just an idea about the slope. As I said, the parking area is a little bit lower than the addition, which is again a little bit lower than the existing building. So this is a view from the south. So the existing building here and the new addition, the sort of butterfly or falcon's wing shape to the new cafeteria. Sorry, I'll give Greg, but it'll really be a fantastic addition to the school. I think if we go to the next slide, you'll see So one of the things we really wanted to work at, as much as we wanted it to be a new and distinct space and a really, a draw for students and for the community, we also wanted it to fit well within the context of the building. So using a lot of the same materials, but changing or the form a bit. So I think it'll really blend in with the school in a nice way. So this is a rendering from the south side, a little bit towards the parking area, so you get a sense of how that form works. The other nice thing about when we get, when this is a little bit lower, so you imagine the existing floor is here, so this is a little bit lower, so within a one-story addition, we get some nice height to that space. We've paid attention to the way the windows work, so from the inside, this ribbon of windows here works nicely in terms of viewing out if you're sitting in that area. The upper windows maintain the visual connection between the existing cafeteria and the parking area. So this is an early schematic of what that space will be like. Obviously, it would have a lot more furniture in it when it's used as a lunchtime space, but you get the sense of, so here to the left is the existing cafeteria. This is currently the exterior wall, and how that addition will work in terms of the scale of the space, and you can imagine how nicely that will work as a multi-purpose kind of meeting space as well.
About the bench and the steps.
Right, so some of the features, because of that, it is all handicap accessible, so there is a ramp that runs along the edge of the space, then there'll be sort of a bleacher steps, and a bench that carries right to the outside, to that small courtyard outside the building. So really encouraging, a nice mix of not just the kind of utilitarian dining tables, which of course we'll have those as well, but also giving students that sort of alternative for study hall or on a free period to come and use the space to meet with each other, to work on group projects, and generally as an alternative to the library, which gets kind of there's sort of too much use of the library, I guess, when at certain periods of the day. So I think this will make a nice other kind of learning space for the students.
So as I mentioned before, we're about 3 weeks or so from submitting the project to OSF. And so we have quite a few activities in the next few weeks. We'll be coming to the building committee the 18th or the 23rd, most likely the 18th. And then we'll be coming in front of this board on the 24th, and our PCT is on July 8th. The windows and the abatement work is scheduled for a little bit later this year. That EDO 42 sign-off is around October 8th, and we'll be coming in front of this board on the 21st, and our PCT for that is around October 23rd. So all three phases will be under construction at one point or another together, but they'll be actually reviewed and bid at different points. At this point, that's really the end of our quick presentation. We were told to make it quick. We can certainly talk a lot longer, but we want to answer any questions the board may have about the project or some of the ideas behind some of these drawings.
I'm sure this is your pride and joy, and you could talk about it for a long time, but thank you for your quick synopsis. Do board members have questions of the presenters or of the chairman of the building committee, who I offered an opportunity to speak, and he said, no, I'm here for questions and answers. Any questions from board members at this time? Mr. Fatterbean, and then Mrs. Maxon Kennelly.
Could you tell me what the change in elevation is between the existing cafeteria to the one of the higher levels of that two-level addition? Do you understand what I mean as far as the existing...
Floor, the difference in the floor
difference. Yeah, difference
elevation?
in floor height, approximately.
It's 30 inches, I believe.
Oh, 30 inches.
30 inches.
Relatively minor, then.
Yeah, but what it does is it gives us a little bit more height in that dining hall,
Right.
because right now, as you know, the cafeteria is in essence a one-story space. It's a little bit higher story. It's maybe 16 feet or 15 feet, something like that. But with an extra 30 inches, it really gives it a nice sense of volume.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to get a feel for that
Yeah.
change in elevation, whether it's going to mean a significant impact and feel like a different space because it's a substantial drop, or whether it's a 30 inches is a bit, but not.
Yeah, 30 inches is really the maximum length we can do with a single run ramp. That really
Okay.
begins to give us the reasons why we have that ramp.
Anything else, Mr. Fattabine, or?
That's it.
Okay. Mrs. Maxon Kennelly.
Okay, a couple questions. First, with the addition taking up more of that green space, do you have any concern, and I don't even know if this is within the scope of the project, but regarding drainage into the parking lot? Because obviously, you've now with no grass, no land to absorb any of that, I can see that becoming a problem.
Well, it's a good observation. What you can't see from the drawing is that we have an actual surface basin. You know that little planting bed in that little courtyard? That's actually a rain garden. So the excess water will be actually drained into that basin, and then that'll be percolated into the ground.
Okay.
So we're taking that into account right now, and in a very simple, kind of sustainable manner, we're addressing, the extra water for drainage.
Okay. Another question, very curious if the headmaster had any concerns about a roof garden, but that doesn't need to be addressed by you. Regarding the glass in the cafeteria, and one question you can probably answer and one question might not be appropriate for right now. First, in terms of heat, is something being done either to the windows themselves or something put in, because if once a sun hits that directly, that will no longer be a student gathering area.
Yes.
Yeah, there's both those things. So first of all, we welcome the sun in because it's part of what we want students to do. We want students to take a break. We want students to be able to sit in a naturally lit space. That's healthy. That's a good thing for them to sort of recharge. What we are doing is there'll be louvers on that glass, so there'll be horizontal louvers because it's largely a south-facing glass. We're also looking at something called a ceramic frit, which is a kind of a dot pattern. You see it, typically you'll see it in your cars actually, as a way of, it's not something that you'd really pick up on so much, but it does help us to mitigate how much solar gain comes into that room. The louvers actually, for us, have as much to do with the heat gain, but also glare, since, like all of us, screens are a big part of what they'll be doing there, so we definitely take that into consideration.
Okay, and this might be a question, I don't know for gentleman over here or to Dr. Title, but are there discussions between the building committee and any security people and personnel with an interest in how these construction plans could affect what element, and again, I'm not saying that that's a discussion for right now, but I'm wondering if there's some element of the building committee that's in communication with central office administration regarding security. Again, I'm looking at the glass, but I don't know what other aspects of the project.
Sal Morbido is the, connection to the building committee, and Sal's our security person, so I'd rather not say any more.
Thank you.
Mr. Llewellyn.
Just a couple of questions. One, to follow up on the security issue, what's the distance between the edge of the building and that lower parking lot at the cafeteria? That looked like a very short gap. And does
The distance is probably about 8 or 10 feet.
Yeah.
Sorry, about 8 or 10 feet between the existing parking and the new addition.
and does the state have guidelines?
Yeah, there will be a bollard or some kind of wheel stop between the back of the cafeteria expansion and where the parking space is. And I don't know if you could see it, but there was also a slight incline.
I
So
saw a
it's
slight
not
incline,
just totally
right.
flat, but there's actually a move to create a physical barrier so that somebody, couldn't drive into the building. So we've thought of that in the way we've graded the building.
Perfect, thank you. And then in terms of cost, is this in line with what has been projected in the past?
Yeah, currently, Gilbane is preparing a detailed cost estimate, and within the next week or so, we'll have a pretty good sense of what we expect the bids to come in.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
And you expect to be on budget?
I hope to be. We have to be.
Yeah.
We have to be. We've only got a,
Thank you for the second phrase, rather
Right.
than hope
We have to be.
You have to be. Mr. Convertito.
That comment may make my comment moot. I'm just curious, what's the rationale for the rooftop garden and or that And my reason for asking that is I'm a firm believer that schools are never built too small. So why wouldn't we create more interior space rather than put that garden out there?
Well, we've looked at many, many different options, and I think we're probably on number 8 or 9, and what's driving the final form of this building is really the limited funds. We simply didn't have the funds to complete a non-programmed part of this project. So that's really how that came about.
I just want to comment on that. One of the features of how we did this project as well as how we did the Osborne Hill project is, remember, we wrote very specific ed specs, and then we gave them to the building committee and said, you need to meet these ed specs and you're not to go beyond the ed specs. And the ed specs called for 4 general purpose classrooms and 2 science classrooms. So they are doing exactly what we instructed them to do. And obviously the limited funds keep you from doing any more, but one of the issues that obviously this town's been concerned about has been the whole question of scope creep. That if people see extra money in the project, they feel like, oh, we have extra money, we can add to it. Under our new rules of engagement, that's not to happen. And so they are doing exactly what the board and town expect out of the project: 2 science labs, 4 classrooms, expand the cafeteria, fix the roof, fix the windows, you're done.
Okay.
And we'll be able to have our lunch.
Any other questions from board members? Mr. Fattabine?
Another question, I just have a curiosity here. On your presentation, I believe I saw that you had a science room or a science classroom on the first level or ground level, the 4 classrooms on the second level, I believe, and then another science classroom on the third level.
Correct.
On the drawings dated April 9, 2014, if I'm reading them correctly, it's a different configuration. Has it changed? And the configuration in this is the...
Yeah, it has. Through comments through the administration principal, the arrangement of the classrooms is associated with what else is in the Webster wing at those levels. So the science wing, the classroom was positioned to be adjacent to the other classrooms. The science was positioned to be adjacent to the other sciences. That's how that stacking worked.
Which is different than the ones
Yeah,
dated
it
April
might be
9,
different. I mean,
2014.
that whole wing, that academic wing, was moving about up until a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I just want
Yeah.
to confirm it's different.
Yeah, it has to do with what's adjacent to
Right,
what.
right, the different flow and traffic with respect to
Exactly.
different use of the classrooms. All right, but it was different, that's all. I thought I was confused, but, you know.
Okay. Mrs. Gerber?
Yeah, I think that we did get an updated version of those plans. April 18th, was
Could
that
be.
the last one, I
Could
think?
be.
And I believe all the board members got it, but I can double check, and if they didn't, I
Yeah,
can
there's
make sure
been a
they
lot
do.
of packets that we've handed out.
There have been a lot, but I know that there was one after April 9th, and I think it was April 18th.
Okay, if there are no further questions, we have a full agenda, and we also have an executive session after the regular meeting. Thank you for coming, and I assume that we'll see you in the building person on, chair on June 24th,
Right.
if there are any final questions before we take action.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman. Good evening.
For the board members, we do have another architect here who's on the clock, and I wonder if I could get unanimous support to move the approval of plans and specifications for Mill Hill Roof Replacement Project up next so that we could take care of that item now and then let Mr. Silver go home. Any objections? I see no objections. So, Mr. Silver, let me get the motion on the table while you're coming up, and this is approval of the plans and specifications for Mill Hill. Recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the plans and specifications for Mill Hill Roof Replacement Project, TMP 051 PZBV. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Kennelly, Maxon Kennelly, do I have a second? Mrs. Gerber? The motion is on the table. As a reminder, this is a project that we have approved in the past, but as you're familiar with, the state requires additional approvals at different times during the stages of the project, and Mr. Silver is the architect related to it. And are you speaking directly, or do you have any projection?
No projection
No
needed.
projection. So we can stay here, and Mr. Silver, the floor is yours.
We've been charged to speak even shorter than Joe Costa did, so I'll keep it brief and essentially say in front of you are the plans and specifications and estimate that require your approval. We received the contract 3 days ago, and you can see the plans are complete. We have a scheduled plan completion test with the Bureau of School Facilities on Monday. This should be a fairly rudimentary approval. You can see the 14,000 square feet of roof consists of just a few portions of the remainder of the roof at Mill Hill, which are aged or older than the rest of the roof. We're matching the existing membranes that are up there, maintaining the low slope for meeting building codes, and obviously replacing skylights as well as one that is damaged in another portion of the roof. What you have essentially is the whole extent of the project. The budget you can see is $270,000, or construction estimate, which is well below the monies allocated just because of the efficiency of materials and construction. And with that, I will stop. The plans, specifications, and estimates are ready to go, and they just need your motion and approval.
And these are in line with the ed specs and all that stuff?
100% in line.
Questions from the board members on this? This is an action item, so we will go to the public after we have some conversation. Any questions from board members on this? Mr. Llewellyn?
In terms of the warranty, what do we have being allocated to this roof, and what's the age of the existing roof, please?
In what system? What was the last part of that
The
question?
age of the existing roof. Sorry, my voice is gone here.
The age of the system is about 22 years old and older in some cases. It dates back to the additions in the 90s. And the warranties that we are designed into it are the minimum that the state mandates to maintain reimbursement. So it's a 20-year, no dollar limit, non-prorated warranty.
Okay, so full replacement.
Full replacement.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Mrs. Lou McCormick, did you wish to ask a question?
I guess I have a question regarding the skylight. Was it a requirement by the schools to replace the skylight, or was that an aesthetic purely? Is there a need to?
There are
Or
four
four.
skylights. There are
Right.
4 skylights that are in the roof areas that we're replacing. It is customary to either replace them, or if you're a facilities person, usually you blank over them because they are generally despised. But they do admit a natural light. The state encourages natural light, continuing to admit, just like you asked of the prior architects, of the light in the cafeteria. And so where we do have openings, we'd like to maintain them. So that's why we're replacing the 4 with like materials, and then one skylight is damaged. You can see it further to the right on the roof plan. One skylight is damaged, and we are replacing that one as an add alternate in the bid documents. Did that answer your question?
I guess so. I guess, from past experience, I've seen a lot of people who I know who have skylights. There's always problems with them. There's leakage, there's damage, I'm just saying, if we have a chance to demo them and seal them over and then not have an issue for maintenance going forward and save $1,200, has that been considered?
Certainly a pro and con argument, because while facilities people tend not to favor them, skylight technology has improved, and generally the benefits of daylight far outweigh the 15-year misery that happens when they do start to leak and they do have to start being maintained. So the benefits generally outweigh the detriments, and the state actually encourages preserving natural light wherever you can within the school buildings. They have it in writing within their Office of School Facility mandates.
Any other questions that you had, Mrs. Lou McCormick, or not? Other questions from the board? Mrs. Maxon Kennelly.
2 quick questions, only because I can't recall off the top of my head. You mentioned that this is under budget, and what was the number that had been put to it?
What was it,
Well,
Tom?
I have a reason for asking. But, so that whatever it is, I'm always expecting that with any kind of roof project, that once it gets started, damage is found or what have you that is unexpected. So is there room within this, or is that something you'd go back to, and that there is some room there to attend to that immediately?
There is plenty of contingency remaining. I think our budget is over $370,000. So you can see, comparing it to the construction cost, you have almost 30% contingency. And the only unforeseens that we could begin to visualize is that the existing metal deck, as we uncover it, may be a small amount of deterioration, and generally replacing metal deck only is about $5 per square foot. It's not a lot.
If there are no other questions, we'll go to the public, or if there are questions, if not, we'll go to the public. Any members of the public that wish to comment on the Mill Hill roof Replacement Project. Please feel free to step forward. I see nobody rising, so we'll go back to the board for action. If there are no further questions, the motion is on the floor. Are we ready for action? All in favor of the motion that the Board of Education approve the plans and specifications for Mill Hill Roof Replacement Project, and I won't read the number again, please raise your hand. Mrs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's unanimous with the 8 members present. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Silver. So we are back to our regular agenda, back to old business with the, no, we moved that up in place after A. So presentation of AP Psychology curriculum and AP Psychology text. So please come forward, and I guess we have another moving around.
Yes.
If you would move your microphones down so that it doesn't interfere with...
I'd like just to make a few comments before we begin the presentation. First of all, as you know, we usually bring curriculum to you for an entire program across several grades and several levels. So what you're seeing tonight is an exception to that usual rule. We are just presenting the AP Psychology curriculum, and we're doing it now as opposed to waiting until the Social Studies curriculum would be brought to you in the 2015-16 school year, really as a response to the number of requests that we have received from students, parents, and teachers for an AP Psychology course. So we are asking you to consider approving this course now so that we can offer it next year. And to lead the presentation, our Social Studies curriculum leader, Greg Pugliese, who joined us, this is his first year in Fairfield, is going to be giving you an overview of this, but I've also asked him to tell you a little bit about himself since he has not previously presented to this board. So I'll turn this over to Mr. Pugliese.
Thank you, Dr. Boyce. Good evening, everybody. For those of you who have not formally met, my name, again, is Greg Pugliese. Like Dr. Boyce said, I'm finishing up my first year as Social Studies curriculum leader. Prior to this position, I taught high school social studies for the past 12 years in Waterbury. I very much appreciate the opportunity to present here tonight. The entire social studies department is very excited about the possibility of offering AP Psychology in both high schools. We believe it would be a positive addition to our course offerings and would be very beneficial to the students of Fairfield. So I'll get right to it. Throughout tonight's presentation, I'll be discussing exactly how AP Psychology would benefit our students at both high schools. I will provide an overview of the course curriculum and an overview of how that curriculum was developed. I will also discuss the resource and textbook search process and describe the recommendation we are making. And I will describe the next steps as well. So why AP Psychology? Well, this is an opportunity to add another college-level AP course to our course offerings. There is very high interest in Fairfield, as Dr. Boyce mentioned. Psychology is our most popular elective, certainly in social studies, and one of our most popular electives overall. We currently offer a full-year elective as well as a semester-long elective in psychology, and both are very popular. This chart on the screen shows combined enrollment data from both high schools from the past 4 years for the full year and semester electives. For the 2013-14 school year, combined between the two high schools, we had 9 sections of the full year psychology elective and 6 sections of the semester elective. Also, we've had a number of students taking the AP exam without the course being offered. And the chart at the bottom of the screen shows those numbers from the past few years. We believe that offering the AP course would provide many more students the opportunity to take the exam and earn college credit, and also have the experience of a college-level psychology course while still in high school. And those numbers have been steadily increasing over the past few years of students that have been taking the exam. According to the College Board, out of the 32 AP courses and exams offered, AP Psychology ranks number 6 in enrollment in exams given annually, nationally. In fact, of the 15 districts in our area that we researched, 11 of them offer AP Psychology. It is the second most popular college major behind business, according to the Princeton Review. Psychology develops important skills for college and career readiness. We will be emphasizing research methods and data analysis, and there will be a focus on academic research using peer-reviewed journals, including methods, validity, reliability, and a synthesis of literature. Other skills include recognizing the strengths and limitations of applying theories to explain behavior. And psychology opens the door to a variety of growing careers, including psychiatrist, industrial organizational psychologist, neuropsychologist, clinical psychologist, sports psychologist, educational school psychologist, and forensic psychologist, just to name some. This course will be equivalent to an introductory college course in psychology. It will be challenging and rigorous, and will introduce students to the systematic and scientific study of behavior and mental processes of human beings as well as other animals, the facts, principles, and phenomena in each of the major subfields within psychology, and the ethics and methods of psychological research. The course is based on national and state standards in both content and skills. The content of the course is provided directly by the College Board, and the topics have been selected by college and university instructors as well as experienced high school instructors who serve as members of the AP Psychology Development Committee for the College Board and AP. The material reflects the content of a typical introductory college course. This content is also aligned with the American Psychological Association, the APA, content standards, which provide in-depth standards for what students should know and be able to demonstrate in the field of psychology. We have also embedded skill standards, including the Connecticut Core Standards for Literacy and Social Studies, for reading and writing in the content area, and the Connecticut Social Studies standards as well. From these standards, we were able to create a series of central understandings and essential questions for the course. If you have the document in front of you, the curriculum document, I would like to just walk you through a bit of it to illustrate the structure of the document. What you see on the screen is on page 4, but if you would, please begin on page 2. You'll see a description of the course, followed by an overview on page 3. Let me know if I'm going too quick. Here you'll see the course goals, central understandings, and essential questions. Page 4, which is again on the screen, provides a year at a glance. The course is based on 14 topics, organized into 6 units of study. Again, those are the content is provided directly from the College Board. If you continue on to page 5 in the document, I'll quickly talk about the structure of each unit, just highlighting Unit 1. Each unit begins with the unit objectives, followed by skill objectives on page 6. Essential questions and focus questions that pertain specifically to the unit of study. This is followed by the standards that are emphasized in the unit. And you'll see the American Psychological Association, the APA standards, followed by the Connecticut Core standards for literacy and history and social studies, and followed by the Connecticut Social Studies standards on page 8. And each of the 6 units follow that same structure. Beginning in the fall of this school year, myself and a committee of teachers conducted a thorough process of research and a review of standards, including the ones I just mentioned, the College Board topics and expectations, the APA standards, Connecticut Core standards, and state social studies standards. We then organized the standards into units of study. We conducted a focus group of teachers, administrators, and parents to review the curriculum document and provide feedback. The curriculum was then posted on the district website for community feedback. We also conducted student focus groups at both high schools with students that took the AP exam this spring and received some valuable feedback from them as well. We then brought the document to the District Curriculum Council for review and feedback. And throughout the process, we continually revise the document based on the feedback received. For the textbook and resource search process, we considered several key factors. Content, we looked at how well the various textbooks aligned with the standards and the major concepts in AP Psychology. We made sure that each textbook under consideration appeared on the College Board example textbook list for AP Psychology. We also looked closely at skill development and how well the resources developed application of those skills. We looked closely at the formative assessments embedded in the resources, that they were of high quality, used multiple measures of assessment, including reading, writing, and performance tasks, and that they were written in the style of the AP exam. We looked closely at the readability of the text and the resources, including the organization of the textbook, learning objectives and summaries. Rigor, this is a college-level course, and we wanted to be sure that the resources being used were academically equivalent to college-level psychology resources. And we looked closely at the student and teacher materials. We were very interested in an online component to accompany the text, along with teaching strategies and extension activities. Using the criteria that I just mentioned, a search committee narrowed down possible textbooks to 3. We then asked the publishers to present to a focus group of teachers, administrators, parents, and community members. The members of the focus group scored each resource on a rubric and provided feedback. We then held student focus groups at each high school, again with students who took the AP exam this May, and were provided with important feedback from them as well. And then it came back to a selection committee of teachers and administrators where we reviewed the data and feedback collected to arrive at a recommendation. Our recommendation is Myers Psychology for AP, the 2nd edition. The author is David G. Myers. Dr. Myers is one of the most recognizable names in the field of psychology. He has authored 17 books on the subject, on psychology itself, and on teaching psychology. He's published chapters in over 60 other books and numerous scholarly research articles in professional journals. He also served on the American Psychological Association, the APA's working group that created the 2010 revision of the national standards for high school psychology curriculum. It's a brand new book. It just came out this past March. The publisher is Worth Publishers. The textbook is on the list of approved textbooks for AP Psychology put out by the College Board and is one of the most commonly used texts for this course throughout the country. It is a college-level textbook that has been aligned to AP standards. It is broken into 14 units to match the College Board course description, and further broken down into 80 smaller modules for chunking of information and for pacing. It has clear, measurable learning objectives, so students can test their mastery of each concept at the beginning of and throughout each module. It contains very helpful AP exam tips, written in the margins of the student edition, alongside relative content to help students learn as they go. It has those high-quality formative and summative assessments aligned to the AP exam. It includes a multitude of enrichment and extension materials for students, including critical thinking activities, research exercises, active learning projects, as well as teaching tips and strategies for teachers. And the textbook also includes an online version and a companion website to reinforce the topics, concepts, and skills. With approval of the curriculum from the board, this summer we'll work on writing an implementation guide. Teachers will also be attending AP training at Taft and Watertown this summer for professional development. Later in the summer, we'll be collaboratively planning, writing a syllabus, which will be sent to the College Board for approval. That's the AP audit, which you see on the screen, and developing common assessments as well. All of this to be ready for implementation in the 2014-15 school year. Then the curriculum and the course itself will be continually evaluated through classroom observations and teacher, parent, and administrator feedback, as well as a review of future AP exam scores. This slide summarizes the anticipated cost to the district. We currently have enough student interest for 2 sections of the course at each high school. We would be ordering 90 copies of the textbook and resources, which would cost approximately $11,970. This cost has been included in the 2014-15 textbook budget. Summer work, including writing an implementation guide and syllabus, along with collaborative planning. This will cost approximately $1,860. And AP training for the 3 teachers at Taft will cost $2,700. This and the summer work have been included in the 2014-15 social studies implementation account budget. Finally, there will be no impact on staff FTE as a result of the new course. These sections will be effectively taking the place of some of the full-year elective sections in psychology. So I want to thank you again for the opportunity to present tonight. I'm very excited about the possibility of introducing this course. Again, we believe that it's of huge benefit to students in Fairfield. We welcome any questions you may have, and thank you very much.
Should I ask my question?
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Questions from the board, and I think Mrs. Lou McCormick has one or two.
I was just curious, you just mentioned that it was taking the place of other full-year elective or psychology electives. I'm just wondering what those were.
Well, yeah, the sections of AP Psychology would be taking the place of some of the sections that are currently offered for the elective psychology courses. What I mean is, of the 9 sections this year that we offer of the elective, I believe there will be 5 sections of the full-year elective, and there'll be 4 sections total between the schools of the AP course. So what I mean is there won't be any increase in FTE as a result. The sections will be just moved over to.
So the elective psychology course, there's only one psychology course, and you just have 9 sessions
Right.
offered.
Currently,
and
we
you'll
have-
cut it back to
Right.
7 or whatever.
Exactly, right.
Anything else? Other questions from board members? Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, Mr. Patton?
Well, first, thank you for bringing it here. I know in Greenwich it is absolutely one of the most popular courses there. I think it's tremendous that it's being added to the curriculum here. And in terms of I assume there's nothing that would slow it down, even if there were issues with the AP audit, that the time frame on that in terms of the turnaround, you would be getting the feedback from them quickly enough to act?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll have time in the summer to write the syllabus and submit it in August.
Okay. I was also wondering, actually, honestly, about the number of 90 copies. Only 90 copies. I would assume that that's a number you're going to need to come back to next year and request more. I can't imagine that the course won't take off beyond that, but I assume that you'll just deal with that later.
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
We have about in the mid-80s right now, combined between both schools.
Please may they not lose the books. And then also, I was curious about the nature of the feedback that you'd received. I mean, what were some of the significant changes, especially with the feedback from those students who went ahead and took the exam without the actual AP course? And so wondering how it really, the nature of the course changed because of that.
Mm-hmm. The best feedback we got from the students was with the textbook itself. They think that the textbook would be very valuable. They like that it's aligned directly with the course. They like the AP exam tips that are embedded throughout. So that's the best feedback that we got. We presented them with a few different of our final options and textbooks, and this one came out very highly rated by the students. So I think from the students, that's the best feedback that we got.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Patton?
Following up on that subject from Ms. Max Kennelly on the textbook, is there a difference in terms of how the class is taught through this textbook versus what an actual, Psychology 101 class would be on a college campus? It seems like this is more teaching to the test than an actual college course might be.
The content is arranged like the College Board course description. it is the same material as, the Myers does have a college version of this. And from what I understand, that the material is just arranged to fit the topics of the College Board curriculum. So I don't see much of a difference in terms of the content, maybe in the order of material, but the content is the same.
And this class is still a one-semester class, right? Or
No,
it
this
full
is a
year?
full-year course.
So it's a full-year course that technically takes, you know, a 4-month college class and stretches it into a year?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the C hours for a semester course in college are equivalent to a full-year course in high school.
Okay. I don't know if I
Or
agree
the-
with that.
the-
The high school students would be sitting in the
the
class
work
longer,
anyway.
but, no, it's and that actually makes more sense as to why, you know, you're using, or they chose a textbook that's more aligned to that, because obviously you can't teach the same things, block the same way, because you're stretching it out over a longer period of time. Do we offer an honors psychology class now?
We do not. We have, just the electives are unleveled.
Or unleveled? Okay. And are the teachers who are teaching or will be teaching the AP version, I don't want to use the words up to the task, are they prepared for the challenge of a more rigorous assignment?
They are. They all three currently teach the elective in psychology. They're very excited to teach AP. They'll be going on training this summer, and they're very much up to it.
And did they have an opinion in the selection of the textbook as well?
Oh, yes, they were on the committee. Yep.
All right. Thanks.
Welcome.
Seeing no other questions? Well, okay, you were raising your hand as opposed to Mr. Convertito.
And I don't know if this is through the chair to Greg or through to Dr. Title or Dr. Boyce. Given our current budget climate, how do I, as a Board of Ed member, justify spending $17,000 on a new course when we're cutting other programs? When we're cutting other programmings.
Well, first of all, we didn't cut any programs this year, number one. Okay, well, I mean, the programs we have this year, we're running next year, right? And number two, this was included in the budget. I think the board looked closely to ensure that the textbook accounts were sufficiently funded. I think people asked questions to make sure. We need to continue our improvement efforts in the district with this. Certainly, if you know how, for better or worse, high school rankings do take into account the number and how well kids do on AP. We've done very well on that, and we won an award recently for that. We're concerned about kids who could do more with the psychology than they're getting out of the regular class. This allows for acceleration, which I know is something the board cares about. And so this was always, in the works. Our curriculum and improvement efforts need to continue. So we have curriculum development in the budget. We have new textbooks in the budget, and periodically new courses in the budget. So to me, the gain on this is more than justified by the expense, despite the fact that, although if you have kids in college, you don't flinch when you see $133 a book. You may not realize that if you haven't had kids go to college yet, that this is what things cost nowadays. And I think what Mrs. McAnally said as well is, I think after this runs once, we may need to increase the budget for it, which I think would be a good thing. And the other point I guess I would want to make on this is that the prerequisite to take this class is relatively modest, and this is a class that lots of kids could access, right? Who may not be able to access other AP courses. So I think this gives us an opportunity to get some more kids who maybe hadn't had the AP experience or had a limited AP experience to get AP credit. So for all those reasons, I think this is a great thing, and I think Greg and his committee did a lot of work on this, and to step out on this in your first year here, I think is something I'd like to applaud.
If I can have one last question so that we can move on. This will be an action item for the next regular meeting. Mr. Llewellyn.
Sure. To follow up on that question, how, as a board member, do we support adding another course if we have not yet done a audit/review of the current courses and loading in the high school? I think there have been board members who have been asking for that, long before I got on the board even. Where does that fall, and how do we kind of reconcile this with that, if you would, please?
You're directing that to Dr.
please.
Teitel?
Yes.
Well, a brief history of that. One is that before I came, the board actually rarely received full departmental curriculum documents. Typically, there was a little written curriculum, and it was coming in piecemeal here and there, and board members rightfully said, look, we really want to try to look at programs as whole programs, whole departments. That is something that we have moved to, and in the curriculum revision schedule, you'll see that we're in the process of actually aligning to the point where when certain departments come forward the next time, you'll actually see them K to 12. At this point, most of the times you're getting a full department. So when the full department review is done, that's when we go and do an evaluation of the entire department. But as Dr. Boyce explained, this is a bit off-cycle because for no more FTE, we can offer this and add this to the mix, and we didn't want to wait 2 years to do it. Looking at the entire high school breadth of the program is actually something that's done by the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. Every 10 years, and they follow up after 2 years and 5 years, and they look at the entirety of the program and make recommendations. So that occurs as well. So this coming as a singleton is a bit off our normal course of action, but we do have a defined cycle. But at the same time, I think it's important that, if mid-cycle we identify a need that we didn't identify, that we don't wait the full 7 years to make a mid-course adjustment. So that's how it all plays together, and I think that if this were going to be something where we were going to have to add staff, that might be another matter, but this works out well with the existing FTEs and is really a course we already offer. We're simply actually offering it another level, think of it that way. So we have two versions, we're just adding another level of an existing course. So that's how it sort of fits in the big picture. If the board wants to have an outside review, an audit of the entire program, then you need to fund that at some point. But really, most high schools have that done by the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, and that's the template for a lot of their improvement work, and that is relatively cost-effective.
Other questions from board members? Again, this will be an action item for next meeting. This is just for presentation. Mrs. Lou McCormick.
I mean, I do like the idea of adding another level. I think that's nice, and that you haven't, you have the same FTEs. I think that's all very nice. But I take to Mr. Llewellyn's point that we keep adding programs. This is like, I don't know if this is the second or the third new program we've added, all of which I think the ideas have been great. It's just that we keep adding without looking behind us to see what's in the bucket already. So when you mentioned that if we wanted to fund an audit, can we take the next step then to get that priced out as to what it would cost to do a full audit? Not to necessarily hold up this process, but I think this needs to be started, because I think it's been talked about for several years now. So let's get it priced out, and then maybe we can make a decision as to whether we move forward with it.
I think it's a bigger issue than this, but I also say that this is an example of we are adding something, but something is being removed, right? In other words, this is not just layering something on top of. This is 9 sections of psychology, and in next year will be 5 and 4. So we actually are removing something, and we're adding something in its place. So it's maybe a little different from coming in and saying, here's another completely different course out there that's going to add to the program, and boy, what's that going to do to the whole picture? I think the question of whether you want to pay to have a whole audit of all the high school courses in lieu of the NEASC accreditation that's coming up fairly soon is a question for another time, maybe.
Okay.
Well, I'd like to make the request to get it priced out. So I'd like to add
Well,
that
if
to...
the board wants me to
Well,
spend the work to do that, I'll do that, but I
First,
don't
the
want to
board
go
would
on a
have to
wild goose
decide
chase.
collectively whether we wanted to go down that path.
How do we make the motion?
Well, you don't make a motion because it's not, you'd have to make a motion to add something to the agenda, and you'd have to get 6 votes to do so.
Okay, so I'll put that on the agenda, as an item to add to the agenda in a
I'll
future
second
date.
that motion.
Okay, you wish to make a motion that says specifically what to the secretary?
Deal with this motion first.
This isn't a motion?
Correct.
As they come up.
Oh, I'm
No, no.
sorry, right, there's no motion here.
There's no motion.
No, this is a
This is a
presentation.
discussion, right?
So make the
Are there
motion.
any other questions on the presenters for this particular course? Because if there are not, we're done with the presentation. Correct? We're done with the presentation. So you wish to add an item to the agenda at this moment, or do you wish to do it at the end of the meeting when we've finished with the other agenda items?
We can just do it now.
Okay.
since it's
What
a-
is your specific motion so that the secretary can get it down?
Right, so we want to add the motion to have the audit topic added as the agenda item for the next meeting.
For now,
Or for now. For now.
to authorize, well, it can't be to the next, right?
Oh, can we authorize the audit, take a motion to vote on authorizing?
We should look into.
First, you have to have a...
pricing of an
excuse me.
audit.
First, you have to have a motion to add this as a topic to our agenda. First, you have to do that. If that motion does not get 6 votes,
Okay,
that's
fine.
the end of the
Okay,
discussion.
fine, that's fine, then we'll do that.
Just
We'll make a motion to add that as an agenda item. And
add,
take the board-
not that, but add discussion of
an audit, a program
Pricing
audit.
out an audit.
program audit of the high schools.
Of the high school.
Okay.
The pricing of a program audit for the high school.
Okay, and Mr. Llewellyn, you're seconding
Second
that.
correct.
Do you have any other further comments that you want to make as the motion maker? You don't have to, okay. As the seconder, do you have any comments that you wish to make?
I do. I think this is something we've heard from boards over the years. I think there are members who are sitting here who have asked for it in the past. I think that the concept of getting a price for it is innocuous enough. So I'm not really sure why anyone would not want to understand what it would cost. We're not actually authorizing the audit, so I think we should at least see what it costs to get it checked.
Any other comments that board members wish to make? Mrs. Maxon Cannelli.
Through the chair to Dr. Title, how much time would doing something like this take?
I don't know, this is coming out of the blue. This is just a big mistake to just do this stuff. I don't want to get into it.
Follow up with that, I have no interest, I'm not interested in staff spending its time on yet another new initiative being put on top of everything else with the
This is a motion to add an agenda item, so you're debating whether to add it, not the actual discussion topic, whether to add it or not. So-
Right, and so I'm not even interested in it being on the agenda because I don't want to move this forward, especially since we have a board here that is, and that includes myself, largely ignorant. The first question I have is, what did NEASC say the last time they reviewed our curriculum? What did we already learn before we even looked to spend time and money and effort on anything else?
Other comments that board members wish to make? Mrs. Lou McCormick.
Just for Mrs. Cannelli, that's exactly what we're trying to find out and have a discussion on. We want to understand where we are currently so we can decide what should be done, if anything. So we need to start that discussion at some point, so all I'm doing is making a motion to start that discussion, as opposed to delaying it for another 2 years.
Like Mrs. Maxon Cannelli, I think that the NEASC audit is coming up and is a more cost-effective way of doing it, but also our bylaws say that unless it's an emergency, we don't add items and make decisions at the same meeting without the superintendent having adequate time to look at it. So I would say that this, for me, this is not an appropriate motion at this time. Any final comments that people wish to make? Your last comment, Mrs. Maxon Cannelli?
Last comment, more to the point, I believe at our next meeting, we're going to be talking about board goals. And this would fall under the concept of board goals where we're going to put our time. And if this is something that we as a board want as a board goal, that would be the time for that discussion and work that is to fall upon us and not on central office. So I agree, it's something we have brought up multiple times, but I think the time for that to come up will be in that goals discussion of June 24th.
If there are no other final comments, the motion, if you could read it, please.
To add an item to the agenda, the topic of the discussion of a program audit for the high schools.
Correct?
The pricing.
Okay, you didn't say pricing before. You and Mr. Llewellyn were
that's-
talking at the same time. So could you just say it again to me, please?
The pricing of a program audit for the high school. You just had to add the word
Discussion
pricing.
of the-
Discussion of the pricing of... The discussion of the pricing of a program audit for the high schools.
Clear? Clear, Mr. Llewellyn? Mr. Convertito? This is only a...
Motion is to put something on the
Yes.
agenda for discussion?
Yes.
Yeah, just for
That's what her motion was, yes.
Without having any anything prepared?
That's what her motion is.
Listen,
future
I have
agenda.
long been a proponent of a program audit, okay? We have an agenda in front of us. We can deal with this goals. It's just inappropriate to do it in this manner right now.
Okay, thank you. Any other final comments? If not, we will go to vote. This is an administrative matter for the board, so we don't go to the public on administrative matters to the board. Do you need the motion read to you again, or does everybody understand the motion? All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Mrs. Lou McCormick, Mr. Llewellyn, all opposed? Mr. Convertito, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Fattabine, Mrs. Maxon Cannoli, Mr. Patton. The motion loses 2-6. So we are on to the approval of the revised Educator Professional Growth Plan. This plan is being... Oh, I skipped over something. I've got various arrows moving things around, so I missed. Approval of the English Language Arts Curriculum, grades 6 to 12. The recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve the English Language Arts, grades 6 to 12 curriculum. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Maxon Cannelli, Mrs. Gerber. So the motion is on the table. As the originator of the motion, you have first opportunity to speak.
Thank you. And I know, it's my understanding that Dr. Poisson, especially Mr. Chiappetta, have a tremendous amount to say to us tonight in response to many questions. So I'm not sure if my comments might be better suited to after they've addressed the many questions that they've received, or I think
Okay.
so. I think I might
So,
prefer to defer to
Do
them
you
first.
wish to make additional presentation tonight, and then we'll go back to the board for discussion?
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay, so, Dr. Boyce.
Just briefly, since you saw the presentation, we have taken your feedback. Mr. Chiappetta has gone back to the teachers, the English teachers in the middle and high school, and discussed this with them, and I sent Dr. Title, who shared with you a memo on June 3rd about those conversations. In addition, Mr. Chiappetta would like to take some time to respond to questions that were sent to him by email, so I'm going to ask him to do that at this time.
Hello again. Glad to be back. Just to follow up, the one specific change that we made in response to a proposal that was made in May was the addition of some language that you all have about common literary experiences at both the high school and middle school level, and you do have that language in front of you. At the high school level, we all value common literary experiences, and that's true at all levels, middle school and high school. In the high school level, in grades 9, 10, and 12, will be a minimum of one full common literary experience, but that will be a novel, and the other will be a Shakespeare play. 11th grade, which is the study of American literature, both of those common literary experiences will be American literary texts. Now, just mind you, that's minimum. We do far more than that. In grade 7 and 8, we will do the same. The language is a minimum of one common grade level literary experience, although of high literary merit. That's language right out of the AP standards and the Connecticut Core standards. And we had that part of the discussion the last time we were here. And again, that's a minimum because we do far more common literary experiences than just that, but in the spirit of moving forward. And in grade 6, we will hold to doing common literary experiences that are shorter. It's a nice transition year from 5th to 6th grade for us, but we do common literary experiences that are short stories. We do poetry, we do literary nonfiction, we do excerpts from novels, and again, this doesn't preclude us from doing full novels as well. So that was the language that we will add to the curriculum documents. Additionally, since Friday, we received I don't know, in excess of 20-plus questions, and the questions basically fall in 4 general areas. The first one is assessment and data, the second one is accountability structures, the third one is instruction specifically, and the fourth one is content, and content in this case referring to nonfiction and the use of informational text. So I'm going to try to group the questions together and kind of give you a summary response to all of them. The first group of questions around assessment and data asked in a variety of ways about how the curriculum will be measured. As we mentioned last time, once the curriculum is approved, then we can begin to build assessments. That said, we have a couple of things that we already do and will continue to do. We have this year developed, used, and implemented a common writing rubric in 6th through 8th grade, and then also in 9th and 10th grade and 11th and 12th grade. We've used those. Those are aligned to the Connecticut Core Standards. They're aligned to the new SBAC assessment. And we will continue to use those rubrics as a way of assessing student writing achievement as defined by the new standards. Our goal this year moving forward, and again, after this is implemented and after this is approved, is to work with our colleagues in social studies so that we are using the same rubrics in the middle school for writing and the high schools for writing across departments. And therefore, we'll be able to measure writing in 2 different domains, as it exists in language arts and as it exists in social studies in middle school and in high school, so we're looking at the same thing. So that's one way we'll look to assess the curriculum. Also, we'll continue to give reading assessments, which we've been doing in a standardized way in 6th, 7th, 8th grade, 9th grade, and 10th grade. We made that decision a few years ago to make sure that what we were doing was assessing kids in reading that was aligned to these new standards. Now that we have a little bit of an understanding about what the new assessment looks like, we're going to continue to do that. Additionally, and I mentioned this in May, the consortium that developed this new assessment has made several promises and plans to create and make available a number of assessments, interim assessments, benchmark assessments that any district can use to assess student growth against these standards. This is a new initiative that they have. They are just now beginning to release some of these, and we will begin to incorporate some of those once they're made available to us, which they aren't quite yet. And additionally, once the curriculum is approved, we would want to take those and use those to make sure that what we're doing is getting kids ready against the standards and for these new assessments. Additionally, there was a question about the use of data and data teams at the high school. I can't really give you a full explanation of data teams at this time, but I can give you 2 examples of how data teams function at both the high school and at the middle school level here in Fairfield. Data teams, if you will, are basically groups of educators who come together at a specific time and look at student performance. In language arts, what we've done this year, I'll give you an example from one of the middle schools. This happens in all of the middle schools. I just want to give you an example from one, where teachers came together and they said, what we want to know is if what kids are able to do on a timed piece of writing is the same as what they're able to do on a processed piece of writing. Specifically, we want to look at their use of evidence and their ability to develop their idea. So what we did was we had teachers give these assessments. We brought these assessments to a data team meeting, if you will, and then we looked at making some comparisons against rubrics, the same rubrics that I just mentioned before. And in doing so, what we did was we were able to calibrate ourselves in terms of, well, do we think that this is a high, middle, or low score? And the second thing we were able to do was to make that comparison, begin to answer those questions. Are kids able to do this in a time situation or not? Which then leads to another level of discussion saying, well, if they are, well, then what are we doing that we can then help other kids? And if they're not, what other instructional changes should we make? So that's one way that data is used to inform instruction in the classroom. At the high school level, at one of the high schools, we've been doing this with groups of teachers, and the one example I'd like to share with you is 9th and 10th grade, where we did almost the same thing. Teachers said, what we want to be able to see is how well are kids able to construct an organizing idea or a thesis statement, and how well can they support it. It doesn't really matter if it's an informational essay or argumentative essay, but that's really what we're looking at. So we had a group of, in this case, I think there were 8 or 9 teachers, myself and some other administrators, who brought examples of student work. We all looked at the same essay. We calibrated it again, looking at what kind of score would we give this. And then we all kind of sat and together and discussed what we thought the strengths were, what the student needed to work on, and then we all began to identify, well, how would we best do that? So that's another way that the use of data then filters down into the conversation at the teacher level, and then also then begins to take shape as to what kind of instruction is going to happen next. There were also questions about the kinds of data that were used on the Tri-State Committee visit. I mentioned in the presentation in May that we really had a great opportunity to invite colleagues from the Tri-State to come in and take a look at our writing program, 6th through 8th grade. The data that we gave them, and it was a question that was about qualitative and quantitative data. The quantitative data that we gave them looks like this. You all have this. This is public data. Essentially, we gave them our CMT scores, and we broke it out specifically in writing. And just so you all have it, you have this copy. But again, this is public data that's been available for some time. The qualitative data that we gave them, or that what they went out and did, was that they, as part of the protocol for their visit, they interviewed teachers, they interviewed parents, they interviewed students, administrators, Board of Ed members, and they also observed classrooms. They interviewed and looked at student work, and students actually brought work to them and had them look at that as well. So there was lots of opportunity for them to gather qualitative data as well. And again, that all went into their report. So that's some of the data that we used, and some of the data that they used for their feedback that we then took into account when we were revising our documents. There was also a question, one of the last data questions that I have here was about a piece of the Tri-State report regarding the use of data and data points or metrics for how decisions are made as to placing 8th graders into the level 1 9th grade course, and it's called English 11. And just so you all are clear, we made available to the Tri-State Visiting Committee, we use a variety of data points to guide teachers in placing students from 8th grade into level 1 and 9th grade. We've done this for a few years now, where we have approximately, I think this year there were 9 different data points. We rely on state testing, such as the CMT. We also utilize our own internal assessments, writing assessments and reading assessments, and we also include grades as well. Like I said, there were 9 data points, and what we are, when we talk with teachers about making these recommendations and placements, we say that as a guide, as a guideline, a student hits 8 of the 9 or 7 of the 9, they should be automatically in. But however, if a student is pretty close on a few of these, because we have to make these recommendations for placement in sometime between January and early March. That's only half of a year. So we say to teachers, this is a guide, it's not a hard cut off at any stretch of the imagination, that use your professional judgment to say, if you see that this student maybe hasn't made all of these cut points, but if they're making progress or you feel that they're ready, then by all means that you should go ahead and recommend them for that. So we do use that data. The one suggestion that the Tri-State made was, well, could you think about using the written word or the portfolio in that process? And that's another thing that we might take back with us and try to think about including that specifically now that that CMT data isn't going to be available to us anymore, and to make that recommendation. That's something that definitely we're thinking about, well, moving forward, how are we going to make those recommendations, those placements next year now that CMT is not there? The group of questions that had to do with accountability are asking questions such as, how will we make sure that what we propose in terms of the curriculum is implemented with fidelity across 3 middle schools, 2 high schools, and also an alternative high school? Again, once the documents are approved, there are a number of things in place that we feel will make this happen. Number one, what's new to this document I shared with you last time is the year at a glance. And the year at a glance is a way for us as teachers and administrators to have conversations about, before a unit begins, here's the expectation, Here's where you should start, here's where you should end, let's think how long it should take. This is also a way to share with administrators for them to know at a specific time where their teachers should be. We also will be and have developed what we call the grammar, scope, and sequence. That part of that conversation is that where and when will those skills be taught and how. That same holds true for moving forward with the mapping of Greek and Latin affixes and thinking about when those should take place. Another way to do this, but again, that's all determined on or predicated on the notion that the curriculum would be approved. Secondly, classroom observations by administrators, but at the building level. Instructional rounds by teachers is another way to do that. But the other way that I think is even more meaningful to do this, because that's accountability from the outside, is what we're looking at, talking about from my perspective, is accountability from the inside, which is teachers holding each other accountable to being on the same page. And the way that that happens is that you have department level, but more specifically grade level by building meetings, where you have 8th grade teachers, for example, previewing a unit and saying, okay, here's the unit of study, here are the main highlights, here are the skills that we want to do, here's the content that we're going to use, here's the assessment that we know we want to use. Well, how are we going to do this? Well, what do you think the best way to do this is? And you have those conversations, and that's how teachers then know exactly what's expected of them, each other. So it's not someone else coming in always and telling them. And again, I think that that's part of supervision, but at the same time, it's even more important that teachers be on the same page and they do that on their own. And this new curriculum gives them a way to do that. Data teams also do that because it's a way of calibrating, as I mentioned before, is another way for us to kind of bring student work together, and we've already been doing that. So another way to say, well, how do you know this is happening in your classroom, is for having teachers bring examples of student work. So you can say, here's the proof. There was also a grid that I was asked to fill out that had to do with trying to identify the percentage of time taught in a specific way in direct instruction embedded for grammar, vocabulary, and texts. That grid is impossible for me to fill out. There are a number of reasons why that's impossible for me to fill out, but I would just say that as a teacher in the classroom, you know that you have to teach certain concepts. Let's use the grammar concept again of commas in a sequence. Well, you may know that that's part of what's required, and you need to know that your kids need to know that, so therefore you know the kids in your classroom. Well, how would we possibly fill out a grid that would say you need to spend 80% of your time directly instructing that and only 20% in a different way? The teachers know that once the curriculum is approved, they'll start to build implementation guides that will guide that implementation, but they are the professionals who know what the best practices are, and they know their kids in the room, and they know the amount of time it takes to directly instruct, or I would say explicitly instruct, because direct instruction is a loaded term at best. And I think that it really relies on them having conversations with themselves, with each other, and with their administrators, and saying, what's the best way to do that? So this grid is impossible to fill out. Instruction, I want to get to a group of questions about instruction. A number of the questions about instruction we talked about last May. However, they all focus on one specific word, and that word is the word workshop. I mentioned this last May, but I feel like I want to mention this again. I'm amazed a little bit, surprised, I should say, at how one small word can create such confusion and angst. The word workshop, I think, is being confused in a lot of ways with other educational terms like whole language, for example, and they're not the same thing. I think, the workshop, as it had been designed and researched and developed by educators and researchers specifically located at Columbia's Teachers College, but also in Berkeley as well, was simply a way of trying to think about the best practices around educating and having kids learn anything. But as I mentioned before, we don't employ the pure workshop model as designed by the researchers at Teachers College. And to take a step back from this, I mean, again, we're talking about a word that has been used in a variety of contexts and in a variety of places. Interestingly enough, the old curriculum documents that were written and brought forth, and they were approved by the Board of Ed in 2006, 7, and 8, were called workshop. They were called Language Arts Workshop. That's what they were called, before there was any connotation or relationship to Teachers College at all. Ironically, Westport's middle school gifted and talented program, the class itself is called Workshop. That's what it's called. Weston, Madison, Darien, New Canaan, Ridgefield, Easton Reading, number 9, all deliberately, specifically call their language arts program and implementation model Workshop. So Workshop has all kinds of meaning, but again, I just was a little surprised at how, I think, how much confusion there is around Workshop in Fairfield. I think at its heart, what Workshop is simply a way of describing people or kids doing something, not being told what to do, but to do something. And what we have chosen to do here is basically adopt what are the, I think, most reasonable and practical tenets of the Workshop approach, or simply active learning. You call it what you want. And those specifically are, 1, to identify a specific skill or concept to be taught that is directly instructed. Number 2, to have that concept or skill modeled. Number 3, to have students practice it with some guidance and get some feedback in it, and then continue to practice it on their own with feedback. I want to take a step back and explain that that's the same way that you go about learning anything. I don't know anything about soccer at all. Nothing. I grew up as a baseball fan and as a baseball player. I don't know anything about soccer at all. My 7-year-old is obsessed with soccer. He goes to practice, and I watch the same thing happen. They say, you're going to learn how to pass with your foot this particular way. I don't know what they're talking about. It doesn't make any sense to me. They tell them what it is. They show him how to do it. They tell him how he's doing and explain, maybe you want to try it this way. They go let him try it on his own, then they go let him try it at a game, and then he keeps learning and keeps repeating it. So it's the same cycle, the same principles that go into learning anything. And so all we're doing is kind of taking the tenets that have been defined as Workshop, but really it's just active learning, and then putting them in place of our teaching. It also goes, I think it's important for me to mention, and I mentioned this last time, that the true Workshop model, as described and defined by Teachers College and other places, requires long blocks of time. It requires a reader's workshop, a writer's workshop that usually typically takes place almost over 2 hours. We don't currently, under our current middle school schedule, have that amount of time. Greenwich does. Westport has made some changes to their schedule. Other places do, but we don't. So we can't call our program the Workshop model, so we don't. There was also a question about the use of peer review in instruction, and how much peer review is used, and how do we hold accountable the quality of peer feedback. I just want to say that, again, this is about instruction, and specifically, feedback on performance is vital to the learning process. You only learn something by getting feedback on it, and feedback has to be timely, and it has to be accurate, and it comes from a variety of places. Peer feedback, and I want to use the word peer feedback specifically, and I'm not talking about peer editing, I'm talking about peer feedback, is only a small part of a much larger writing process. It's one that's been in place for a number of years, and it's used by a number of different people in many different districts and towns across the world. So specifically, it's only one form of response, and what it does is that it models for kids how to get feedback, how to give feedback in a social situation. It gives them practice to read their pieces and work on that instead of reading for revision. It gives them more time in terms of the focus on revision, which is exactly where the most meaningful learning about writing takes place. It enhances their communication skills, and in a lot of ways, this is true, I've seen it happen, it gives kids an increased sense of confidence because they get to talk to their peers, that it's not just the teacher who's saying, this is good, this is not good. It's a way for them to practice and also internalize the qualities of what effective writing is. And I'd also need to say that it's also preparation for the next level for them. kids that write and use peer feedback groups in middle school and high school are going to do it in college too. One of the forms that I have used and shared with teachers is a peer review sheet that I borrowed from the Harvard Writing Center. I mean, Harvard does it, Yale does it, UConn does it. They all use peer review as part of the process. So, in fact, as this one small piece that we use is actually part of a much larger approach to teaching process writing. But the question was about, well, how do you make sure that it's quality? Well, that's what we do. We talk about with teachers about, well, how do you give meaningful feedback and how do you guide kids in giving meaningful feedback? But I want to make sure that it's clear that that's only one aspect, a very small aspect of the writing process and in teaching of writing. There was also a question about a term, authentic instruction, and I will be honest with you that I wasn't really familiar with that term, so I had to Google it. And when I found out is that I reminded myself of that it is a term, essentially, the term authentic instruction was coined in like 1993, and I had just finished up my undergraduate work, so it's not surprising that I didn't really know that much about it, but it was a term that came out of the University of Wisconsin. It's a pretty good term and description. Fred Newman is the architect of this, and it basically has 5 major components. The first one has to do with higher order thinking. It's basically giving kids the opportunity to solve problems on their own. It's a way to measure curriculum, or actually it's a way to measure the implementation of curriculum. And the second aspect of it talks about having an increased level of depth of knowledge, making sure that kids are not doing just low-level recall tasks, or not just being lectured to about specific things, that have to do the work on their own. The third part has to do with that the work should be connected to a real-world experience. Specifically, the way you would measure that is that kids shouldn't have to be motivated to do something, that the motivation should be intrinsic. That the fourth piece is that there should be substantive conversations in the room, that kids should be talking with each other, they should be problem solving together, and they should be creating new knowledge together. And the fifth is that there's social support for all students, and specifically they see that all students should be held to the same level of expectations and have these same levels of experiences. So when I looked at this and I reminded myself about this, it brought me back to what our original goal was at the presentation, was that our whole goal in developing this curriculum and then hopefully moving forward to implementing it would be that we are enhancing the reading, writing, literacy lives of every kid in Fairfield. And I think that this would be a way for us to think about how we would best implement it in a way to measure that as well. There was also a couple of questions about how we would be moving forward with making recommendations about instruction. And as I've mentioned, many times, I think that what we ask our teachers to do at the middle and high school level is substantive, meaning that we're asking them to do all of these pieces, reading, writing, speaking, listening, grammar, vocabulary, and we're doing it, and at the middle level, asking them to do it in 43 minutes. We have really, really great teachers who work really hard to do their job really well. And so what we're trying to give them is a more rigorous curriculum that will allow them to take what they know, be the professionals that they are, work together to present, I think, what is a truly great experience for all of our kids. And so they are up. I heard the question before, are they up to the task? And I will preface that by saying that these teachers are way up to the task in implementing this curriculum with fidelity and having extremely high expectations for all kids, and more importantly, helping them get there as well. There was one specific question about using assessment data and what kind of assessment data we're going to use. And I alluded to that before, but I also think it's important to know that we will pay attention to any data we get back from this latest field test on SBAC. We don't know what the results are going to look like, but we will look at them. But as I've been saying, a lot of the assessments that we've already been doing in reading and writing, we've attempted to align to this new consortium assessment and these new Connecticut standards even before we saw what the assessment was going to look like. So we've already have some ideas about how we might tweak that. And the other thing we want to be able to do, just not just pertain to language arts, is that we want to make sure that what we're doing in terms of writing and assessment and instruction is the same across experiences for kids, specifically in social studies. And that's the next level of work for us, so that kids in the middle level are not being over-assessed in writing, but that they're also being assessed in the same way. So that's another level of work that we're going to do. Finally, there were a group of questions that came in about content, and the content specifically was on informational texts. As I mentioned in the last presentation, that the word informational text just replaced in your lexicon with nonfiction. Nonfiction is no longer called nonfiction, it's called informational texts. As I mentioned in the presentation, there's been a lot of talk of informational text and the role that informational texts play in the new Connecticut standards. There's been a lot of commentary and there's been a lot of criticism as well. The new standards push for a greater use of informational text much earlier. And if you remember, during the presentation, I said that they give percentages. The amount of time is not really so much of what should be there, or the quantity. It's more about a percentage or a guideline of how much informational text should be read. But again, it's across the student's day. So in the 4th grade, they should be reading 50% informational text, 50% literature or literary fiction. But again, across the day. And by the time they're in 8th grade, that shifts to about 55% informational text and 45% fiction, and then by the end of 12th grade, they call for 70% informational text and 30% fiction. But again, it's really important to understand that this is across a whole student's day. So it's not just in an English language arts classroom, it's across the day. So we couldn't quantify it, but what we're saying is that we want to make sure that kids are being able to have that experience and thinking about what they read in social studies, what they read in science, what they read in math, and what they read in the other content areas would also play a role. Further, another question was about what are the types of informational text that would be read, and again, I can only answer this from a language arts perspective, that we would use informational text in a variety of ways. One, it could be literary nonfiction. It could be articles that kids would read to pull apart, if you will, or dissect the craft or the structure of nonfiction in an article. They would also might use it for background knowledge, could be primary documents. I want to give you an example. One example could be in that, I'm thinking about one middle school, we were working with historical fiction for 7th grade. So what we did was that we knew that we wanted to do is that we wanted to give kids experiences reading and writing historical fiction. In order to do that, we met with the teachers, myself, the language arts specialist, and we worked with the library media specialist to come up with ways in which that we could create texts that were appropriate to content level and accessibility for kids to read about a specific time period in history. They include primary documents, included photographs, and included other documents where kids could build their background knowledge around that time period, and then use that information to kind of support their own reading of the literature. A question was specifically asked about, well, how do you know that these texts are appropriate for kids? One thing I mentioned in the presentation is that there are, I'm almost done, 3 ways that you measure text complexity. There's qualitative measures, which include, sentence variety, structure, language, et cetera. And then there's also quantitative measures, which are word length, word variety, and sentence length that you can actually have get a score for. The third one has to do with the reader and the task. So for example, you could have a really easy to read text, but at the same time, what you ask somebody to do with it could be at a very high level. Therefore, the text complexity just now shifts. Where example I think I have given in other arenas would be the book Huckleberry Finn is a particularly not a very difficult book to read per se, but you would not want to give that to a 4th grader because they don't have the background knowledge or the maturity to handle that level. So we work in those 3 areas to determine what's complex and appropriate, and we involve teachers and our library media people and our language arts specialists specifically because they're extremely knowledgeable about that. The final question had to do with the quality of some of the nonfiction or informational text that we've used, and one example was this year we knew that the kids were going to be having a new testing experience that was very different than they've had before. We had been giving kids lots of opportunities to prepare for the CMT in previous years, and in this year we knew that we no longer were going to do that, and that the new form of writing that kids were going to be asked to do was going to be specifically asking them to read something and use that reading to develop a piece of writing in a time situation. So we wanted to give kids that opportunity and basically share with them the kind of experience. So we gave them some informational text, so we asked them to read it and use it and then write it, a piece simply to model the kind of experience that they would go through. We didn't think that this was an exemplary piece of text. It was simply one that we could use as an example. I hope that going through these questions that were largely around assessment, accountability, instruction, and this one about content, is that we've thought a lot about this, and I think we're really excited about what our next steps are. And what we really know is that our goal is to improve the literacy lives of every kid in Fairfield, and we really know that once this is approved, we have the people and the resources and the capability to get to work, and we're pretty excited to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a very thorough review of various questions that came in, so thank you very much. Now back to the presenter, if you wish to make your comments, Mrs., and then the seconder.
This was not to put any pressure on Dr. Boyce and Mr. Chiappetta, but curriculum in general, and this one in particular, was only one of the reasons I ran for the board in the first place. So that was not a pressure situation for you at all. I'd been asked by someone in the public why I hadn't asked more at the last meeting. And it was because the nature of the conversations involved a flow that would have taken, and ended up did, in meetings with Dr. Boyce and Mr. Chiappetta, and then finally just Mr. Chiappetta. It was at least 4 hours. And to say that our meetings didn't need to go that much longer because of my questions was an understatement. The end result of which, it is with tremendous enthusiasm that I make the motion to approve this curriculum. There have been so many changes. This is a staff that has been exceedingly responsive to the requests from parents, the result of focus groups, the queries of the board, and I'm very excited at what's happened. I also know, as already evidenced by the fact that this review has led to changes in the K through 5 review in terms of vocabulary, for example, that this isn't one, well, we approved one last year and that's that. This was a wonderful dialogue that took place. And hearing Dr. Title reference the idea of eventually moving to curriculum approval of K through 12, you know, that's something that, surprise, surprise, English is already leading the way on. So I was excited at the improvements of vocabulary instruction. I was excited at the improvements of grammar instruction, knowing it's going to be an area needing tremendous professional development, and that data teamwork and the implementation guide work is going to be invaluable for teachers for whom it hasn't been a primary level of instruction. I'll continue with and the AP Psychology is a perfect example of this. And this is coming down, and Dr. Boyce and I talked about this as well, the idea that the big push for this nonfiction work, I very, very much expect, is falling on other departments, and that it would be an intrinsic part of middle school and high school language arts, but in a way that is not forced. You know, if you're reading Arthur Miller's Tragedy of the Common Man in conjunction with Death of a Salesman, that's an utterly natural way to incorporate it, and there's no sense of, well, we had to give up a good book because we had to work some nonfiction in. To me, that would be an absolute tragedy, and I get no sense from this that that is being done, that fiction is being sacrificed, it is there in its proper level and balance, and I hope to, and this is why with every curriculum that comes up, I even did it with a business elective, I'm going to keep asking about where's the nonfiction picking up of responsibility, because English is asked to do a tremendous amount. Reading, listening, speaking, writing, grammar, vocabulary, you know, much of that. And that's where, again, this cross-disciplinary conversations that must continue. This cannot fall just on English, because then it's not authentic in that regard. They have to know that knowing how to communicate, and everyone at this table who works in so many other fields beyond education knows what happens when you can't communicate well in business, et cetera, in law, et cetera. And they have to know that it matters in all of their subjects, and I think they're going to get that from this, and I know it will be reinforced. Sure, I would have loved to have seen more book titles, but once again, that's not within the fact that you use the phrase books of literary merit, that's straight off of the AP exams. That is an acceptable phrasing, and with it comes a direct expectation that absolutely satisfies me, that the 7th and 8th graders will be digging into some of these classics, that we didn't have to argue over a year to put on there to decide what's going to fit this. That phrasing works for me. The common experience was the other aspect that without which I would have had a hard time approving this, and we now have that. And I genuinely feel that, I'm sure this is not going to be the perfect curriculum, but that's the whole point of the constant revisiting. So much has been done to change this, improve this, enrich this, that I'm very excited about it, and I thank you for all of your work.
Mrs. Gerber.
Yeah, I seconded this motion because I, too, do support this curriculum. I think it was back in August or early September that I first met with Dr. Boyce and Mr. Chiapetta, and before I met with them, I printed out the old, or I guess currently existing still, English curriculum, and was really taken aback. And we sat and looked at that and started to talk about where they were headed. And I really wanted to thank them so much for being so accessible, answering so many questions, and really taking what we had and making it infinitely better. Of course, there's always room for improvement, and I believe that we're headed in the right direction, which is the most important thing to me, and I strongly support this.
Other comments and questions from board members? Mr. Patton.
I guess just briefly, I'll echo what Mrs. Gerber is saying, is that I remember years back when we moved to this town, examining documents kind of the same way to see, what the town offered, and having an English background, I was very concerned with the English curriculum, and went to a lot of meetings and saw a lot of, in previous administrations and before Dr. Title's tenure, a lot of kind of rubber stamping of, all right, we're just going to do the same thing and change a little bit here and there and change some text and whatever, and this is the best overhaul revamp of a curriculum that I've ever seen. I will go that far, so thank you.
Thanks.
Other questions and comments from board members? Other questions? Mr. Fattabine.
I guess in the beginning of your commentary, did I get the impression that you sort of indicated that some of the assessment aspects in this curriculum document are going to be filled in at a later time? And is that sort of what you implied or said, or am I that wrong?
Well, I think there's two pieces to it. I think one is that, as we mentioned previously, once it is approved, then we know that what we already kind of know, that what we have to do is look for ways to increase our ability to assess kids, but not burden them with assessments. And what I mean by that is that, for example, I'm thinking about grammar here. Now, once this is approved, then we can say, all right, now we know exactly what our scope and sequence for grammar is. Therefore, what we need to be able to do is that we should know that kids coming in from, say, 7th grade into 8th grade, we would know because we have a map of what they should know and be able to do. However, we still have to come up with a way of quickly assessing what kids can do. So then what we would do is work towards building that kind of assessment, not just waiting for it to show up. So that would be one level of it. But then I also wanted to make sure that people understood that we were already doing assessing and reading and writing specifically, and we would continue to do that, but we would also make some adjustments to that, specifically as we learn more about this new assessment. Because we took our best guess, essentially, at what this new assessment was going to look like, and we aligned our rubrics to the rubrics that were released. But again, we want to make sure that we're assessing kids in the right way, but at the same time, that's also preparing them for ultimately an assessment that they're going to be judged against. It's going to be on their transcript, so to speak. So those are kind of two levels of that answer.
Okay. The other comment I would have is basically is in, I guess, Dr. Boyce's memo you sent out with respect to incorporating some of the comments made at the last meeting with respect to the common literary experience. And I guess my understanding, based on your memo, you're going to introduce that in the course overview section. So I guess if you look at the course overview sections, I guess that's, trying to figure out what that might be in a different document. But the only comment I would have is that to be consistent with the document is the document is sort of what the Fairfield Public Schools do, in a sense. And your initial indication is the Fairfield English Department believes. So I would just suggest you might include the Fairfield Public Schools believe in the value of common literary experience and so forth. So it's the Fairfield Public Schools really in the curriculum document that is what it's about, and not necessarily the one department or another department.
Yes.
Yep, makes sense.
So that's what I would
We can do
suggest.
that.
Any other questions, Mr. Fattabine?
No.
Not at the moment. Any other questions from board members? Mr. Llewellyn.
Thank you very much for that presentation. So this new curriculum, am I to assume, is fully aligned with the Common Core?
We definitely use the Connecticut core standards to kind of guide as the minimum what we do.
Okay, and would you consider a curriculum to be a dynamic process that takes place over time? Or is it something that's done?
Oh, no. Curriculum, in my view, in my experience in this field, nothing's ever done. Curriculum has to be dynamic. It has to be fluid, specifically in this arena where you're talking about being measured against new assessments. And I'm talking about almost 3 new assessments. Number 1 would be this new national assessment that our kids are going to have to be ready for and be prepared to take and do well on. Number 2, the SAT is changing. And number 3, the AP continues to evolve. So I would have to be dynamic and be responsive to those 3 measurements, external measurements.
Okay, so when I look at the website, I went out to the state website to look for what their guidelines on curriculum development are. And some of those guidelines are kind of predefining what that rubric is and what that assessment is. If the basis of our curriculum is the Common Core standards, and those are basically state mandated, I really don't understand why we don't have the rubric and why this isn't more developed before we approve it. Because if you are if a curriculum is dynamic and you can change it as you go and adapt it, you don't actually need to put this in place because you can modify what you have. Because my understanding is the kids have been moving to Common Core, but I think that we should have this document more flushed out. We should understand how are we evaluating, what are our goals, what are our metrics, what are our objectives, what's our pedagogy, how are we going to deliver this content. I think that what we have here is a great understanding of what we think as a district are the key goals. But what I don't see and what I didn't hear from you in response to the questions that I asked are how are we going to have consistency? We certainly don't have consistency today among middle schools, and you stated that we can develop the curriculum over time and that it's not something that's locked in place. So we look at it was Mr. Hold on a sec, sorry. I would say Mr. Daly, who, no, Mr. Whaley, who presented at the last meeting, and about the great experience that was going on at Tomlinson. They got to read about all the great poems, and they got to have whole class discussions on it. Yet, you look at other middle schools, and they're learning about the writing essays on chocolate milk. So I don't know if this should be approved without understanding, what is the consistency? What is central office? What is the curriculum leader going to do to ensure that we have consistency across the district? So that's my concern.
First of all, a curriculum document answers the question, what will students know or be able to do? That's the purpose of a curriculum document. It's based on standards, and our curriculum document is based on the Common Core standards that Connecticut has adopted. So that's the essence of a curriculum document. John Chiappetta did answer that question about how we ensure consistency, so I'll go back over some of the points he made. When we have a curriculum in place, and the teachers and the administrators who evaluate teachers know what we expect teachers to be doing in the classroom, then that forms the basis of teacher evaluation. The teachers develop their lesson plans from the implementation guides that are written this summer. The administrators know what's in the implementation guides, they know what is in the curriculum, and our curriculum leaders work very closely with building administrators who supervise teachers to help them understand what they should be seeing when they go into a classroom. So one way we ensure consistency is through classroom observations that are guided by the curriculum leaders working with the building administrators. Another way we ensure consistency is by having common assessments. And you heard about the rubrics that we are using and will next year use in all social studies and English classes that will allow us to assess how students are writing in both of those content areas in every grade. We use reading assessments that are common. We look at that because common assessments not only assess students' mastery, they also assess delivery of the curriculum by the teacher. So we have several things in place in both middle and high school to ensure consistent delivery. A large part of it is through the work of the administrators. When we had the focus groups meet, I heard a lot about consistency and lack of consistency, and I acknowledge that perhaps in the past we haven't done a good job of that. I can assure you that the curriculum leaders know that is very high on my list of what I expect, and when a curriculum is approved, my expectation is the next steps involve ensuring that every teacher and every administrator who supervise those teachers understand what we expect to see happening in the classrooms in all of our schools across all levels.
So I guess to follow up on that, is that something that will be put into place? Because why is that something, why is the resistance to put it in this document? This document is, you know, we've all agreed is basically an adoption of the Common Core standards. So I'm not sure why we can't flush it out and put in that rubric and put out specific measurable objectives. You know, if you look at the guide to curriculum development on the state website, it talks about assessments, instructional resources, learning experiences, philosophies, goals, objectives being laid out in a curriculum.
We separate that. We separate that into
State
the
doesn't.
implementation guide for the curriculum, and I'm going to disagree that the curriculum is simply a list of standards. Much more work has gone into it than that. It's a pacing guide. It develops what we expect over the course of a year, very specifically in the areas of reading, writing, grammar, and vocabulary. So it forms the foundation for all that happens in an English classroom. What happens next is we develop an implementation guide, working with teachers over the summer, and allow every teacher and every administrator who supervises English teachers to have copies of both documents. So together, they know what to expect in a classroom, and that ensures consistency.
Thank you. Are there other questions? Mrs. Lou McCormick.
I asked many questions about the instructional method, and I am guilty of, reading just probably too much about the workshop model, and reading about other cities and towns that have used it to their detriment and who have, in the meantime, dropped it. I've also talked to people in other districts, the superintendent in particular, who told me that it was extremely effective, particularly when it was used with homogenous groups, particularly with gifted and talented groups or higher end students, that the workshop model is incredibly effective. But in our district, we structure it with heterogeneous classrooms, is my understanding, and we have a philosophy or some commitment, I'm not sure, to that heterogeneous mix, and then we seem to be somewhat applying some modified version of the workshop. And I've seen it written in the Tri-State Consortium, in some analysis on our district's performance since the workshop model's been implemented. So I think there is some. And I guess, you know what, forget about the workshop model for a second. My concern comes back to the question of how are the kids learning? And let's say we have a great content, is it being delivered to them? And is it being delivered to them as effectively as it could be to all different types of learners? And that's a big concern of mine, because while I don't have kids in middle school yet, I have heard some stories that some of the essays that students write in some schools, they get graded and they actually get corrections and suggestions from teachers as to how you can write it better. And sometimes kids don't get that. They just get a grade on it with no further direct instruction on what was spelled wrong, what the grammar mistakes were, how you could have written it better. And maybe some students are getting that instruction, but it doesn't seem to be consistently delivered to all the students in the classroom at all levels. So again, that is my fundamental concern, that how we are structuring the classrooms, is that really effectively delivering the content, which may be excellent, that we want to deliver to each of these students, because it seems like there seems to be some gaps.
Do you have a comment that you want to make?
To me, it's the same comment that Mr. Llewellyn asked. It's really about how do you ensure consistency and fidelity of implementation. And I think that it's a process, as Dr. Boyce was saying. I mean, number one, it has to do with do you have an approved curriculum which you can begin to create accountability structures. And I really believe what I said before is that there's two structures. There's an external accountability, which means people check up on you and say, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do this, and where are you? But more importantly and more effectively is that you have internal accountability structures, which simply are teachers working with teachers saying, all right, this is our unit, this is our assessment, this is what the writing looks like. How are you doing this, or what are you? And again, we talked about calibration before, and and to me, that's almost more important, and you will get more accountability and greater consistency when that happens. And I think what we've tried to outline, not just in the document, but through answering these questions about process, which is that's how we get to that. I mean, that's how we get to that. And without that document and moving, and again, these assessments as moving targets, specifically CMT to SBAC, I mean, we haven't had that opportunity, and now we do. And so I think moving forward, that's exactly what we'd expect to have happen.
Well, see, that's very comforting, because really, at the end of the day, it distresses me to hear that students are correcting other students' papers, and that's really their only feedback that they're getting, because students, depends on who's correcting your paper as to whether that feedback is good or not. But if you have the master who is the teacher correcting and giving you the feedback, then you know that the information that they're getting is good, and that if they've made a mistake or a misinterpretation, that in fact the commentary and what they're learning is good information, as opposed to a peer doing a peer. And that element into itself brought me back to the workshop model as a concern, because I know that there's a lot of peer-to-peer stuff versus teacher-to-peer. So again, I just want to emphasize that the whole curriculum seemed very, very nice, and I really hope that the implementation is as strong as the paper, because really getting that content to the kids is really my biggest concern.
I wonder if the board is ready to go to the public, and then we can come back to the board for final discussion. Are we ready to go to the public? This is an action item, and so members of the public may make comments. I'll ask the staff if they could step back for a bit so that you can share the table with members of the public that wish to speak. Again, we have the limit of 2 minutes and to speak to the motion that's on the floor. So is there members of the public that wish to come forward? State your name and address.
Does it matter?
Your choice.
Dawn Llewellyn, 524 Sturgis Road. I listened to the audio tape from the ELA curriculum presentation, and by happenstance came across one of the teachers, not knowing he was an 8th grade teacher until the end, talk about how he crafted a unit that systematically guided students to answer the age-old question, what defeats man, using various texts and various genres of art. He explained how he and a team of teachers created themes across genre units by designing lessons, tasks, assessments that required students to take the relatively newfound understanding of universal themes and apply them across myriad media in a sort of precursor to what is now called synthesis essay. From their initial in-class work discussions, the class sequenced, pored over, annotated stories, myths, various poems, including Auden's Musée des Beaux-Arts, William Carlos Williams' landscape with the fall of Icarus, film version of Jack London's To Build a Fire. He states the rigorous lessons were from our districts from the 8th graders and not 9th or 10th. So then I had to rewind that because it was Mr. Whaley, I think. He's an 8th grade teacher, and my 8th graders weren't challenged this year in that type of content or text. Instead, they were watching YouTube videos on chocolate milk. That was a 5th grade curriculum for our district. And this is why I really think we need the implementation model and assigned text so that every student can experience the rich cultural learning that took place in Mr. Wheely's classroom. It's the same for Stratfield Elementary. For years, these students have been taught with the Wordly Wise workbook. Mill Hill students are learning Latin and Greek roots in 5th grade. So our curriculum leaders need to ensure that the same instructional experiences are happening across this district, between the grades, because they are not, and across the schools. Curriculum leaders are not using these best practices to ensure equitable educational opportunities for all these students. There is no collaborative communication and no oversight by them. We need assigned text, implementation, and we need assessments to ensure that it's happening.
Thank you, Mrs. Llewellyn. Other comments from people? that wish to come forward? State your name and address.
Hi, my name is Kelsey Llewellyn, and I live at 524 Sturgis Road. So, may I begin? Good evening, board members and superintendent. My name is Kelsey Llewellyn, and I'm currently a rising senior at Laurelton Hall. But I attended the Fairfield Public Schools for both middle school and high school. Today, I'm standing here to give my feedback on my experience in the Fairfield Public Schools as it relates to the language arts program, and hope that you could listen to what I have to say with an open mind. When I entered Laurelton Hall, I quickly learned that I was very unprepared for English class compared to girls from other schools and from other school districts. I knew a fraction of the vocabulary and effectively none of the grammar that they had been taught. I spent a whole year playing catch-up for the lost years that I had spent previously in middle school. I had a huge transition from middle school to high school in the amount of homework I received. In middle school, I received a maximum of 20 minutes of reading, and most, if not all, writing, revising, and editing were done in my classroom with my classmates. Yet in high school, I had many hours of writing and reading assignments for homework, and I was very, very unprepared for that. To make things worse, almost half of the time was spent learning things that other girls had already learned in middle school. I did not have these basic fundamentals, and this made it extremely hard for me when I was entering all of these honor classes with all of these girls who had already had it. I spent so much time trying to make up for this lost time that I was getting very stressed out and nervous. And then come the SATs, and I discovered that the gap of my education was even greater than I had thought it was before. Not that the SATs are everything, but when you're looking at colleges, you realize that it could be the difference between going to your #1 school and another school. Therefore, upon entering 9th grade, I didn't know hundreds of basic vocabulary words or basic grammar rules. The curriculum that I had experienced offered no assessments, and therefore I was not forced to learn the fundamentals that I really needed to know. I was never provided discussions of the books that I read, and I never read a book with my entire class, which I learned was something that we did a lot more in high school, and I had basically no background of this, which really hurt me. My freshman year was the first time I read a novel and discussed it with my entire class. The proposed ELA curriculum before you should include instruction on grammar and vocabulary and emphasize the importance of reading a book and discussing it as a class. The curriculum should provide every student with the education they need to succeed in life. As I am a product of the public schools, I think I can speak on behalf of all students when I say that trying to fill in educational gaps is stressful, and cramming for standardized testing at the last minute is futile, and it can be very costly and expensive, and not all students can afford this luxury. I would suggest talking directly with students rather than listening to administrators to know what truly occurs in the classroom. We sit there and they do not. Thank you so much for listening to what I have to say.
Thank you very much. We extended the time a little bit because it's not often that we hear from students, and you probably have 2 parents in this room are very proud of you at this moment.
Thank you so much. It's nice to meet you.
Please state your name and address, and I don't think you're a student anymore, so I'll have to hold you to the 2 minutes if you
I'll
can.
try not to take that personally. Tricia Donovan, 164 Tainer Drive. As a member of PTAC and serving this past year as the VP of Curriculum, I had the pleasure of sitting on most of the focus groups for ELA. And first, I would like to say to the ELA group that I thank you very much for taking a lot of the feedback that was given by parents, mostly on vocabulary, grammar instruction, and common literacy, as important as it is, because it had been missing. And even though standards may not ask for it, we should all know that that is something that is very, very important to students' learning. So I thank you for taking that into account and putting that in the documents. I would also like to thank some of the board members who did come to the focus groups. I thought that was very helpful and re-engaged and reinvigorated the curriculum discussion at the board table this year, and I thank you for that, and I hope that will continue in the future. I would also like to state that the use of the workshop model and the question about it, I think, comes from the fact that, Phil, you're smiling at me, comes from the fact that we have the Lucy Calkins workshop model instituted in K through 5. And having read Dr. Kataya Leonard's dissertation and how the implementation of that was very faulty from 2006 to 2011, I think we all should give rise to making sure that the implementation of the new curriculum consistently, because we didn't have consistency across the district in K through 5 for many, many years, and that we should have constant feedback from administration and from central office leadership about how the implementation is developing over time. We shouldn't wait 6 years to figure out that things didn't work. So if we can take a very strong role in monitoring that, I would really appreciate it, and I think the students would as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please state your name and address.
Christine Vitale, 254 Vernon Hill Road. I have 3 children in the school district. My youngest is in first grade, so he doesn't really pertain to this conversation. I have a 7th grader, and I also have a junior at the high school level. I had some concerns over the years about the language arts curriculum, which is why I made a point of getting on the focus groups. I met with the Tri-State Consortium when they were here in that focus group and the middle school focus group for curriculum. And I'm going to ask you to approve this curriculum because we've heard from many different people that what has been happening the last few years is not working. It needs to be more rigorous. I think this new curriculum is just that. We can talk about what we can improve. This is the first step in going in the right direction. So I'm going to ask you to improve it and continue the conversation, specifically with parents, once it hopefully is approved tonight, and as implementation guides are written. I think it's important that Mr. Chiappetta meets with parents in the fall to explain the changes that are happening, because parents are still concerned about having reading lists and becoming more actively involved, I think, in their students' learning experience. My junior, she also freaked out when she got to, was a freshman in high school, almost dropped out of honors English, and I'm happy to report, got her SAT, 780 on her writing, so kudos to Fairfield Public Schools for that.
Thank you. Please state your name and address. Do you like the chair as opposed to the podium?
I really do. Thank
Good.
you.
Thank you.
I feel so one with the Board of Ed. Okay, hold on. It's cutting into my 2 minutes.
No, it's just starting now.
Okay, Suzanne Visca, 123 Reigate Road. God, they only do this at the Board of Finance. I like this. Anyway, I want to thank Dr. Title for the opportunity and Dr. Boyce and Mr. Chiappetta for allowing me to sit on the ELA Focus Committee. What started in September was my son coming home and looking at me and saying, Mom, you know, you go to all these Board of Ed meetings, and my problem is that why does it matter where you go to school as to what you know? And I had to sit back and think about that, because that's not something that I really thought would happen. I mean, we have a curriculum, we have excellent teachers in the town, and I get it. I mean, our teachers are being asked to do mountains and mountains and mountains of work. But the problem is that we do have a problem of alignment across the district. And while I appreciate, you know, the 6 through 8 with the Common Core, it's great to see grammar in there. It's great to see vocabulary in there. To me, 9 through 12 looks exactly like what we already have. The text that I saw in the implementation is already kind of what we're doing. Romeo and Juliet, 9th grade. Macbeth, 10th grade. I mean, and I get it. I mean, we want to keep the classics alive and in there. But my problem is this. It's that final statement that a parent just said, which is, well, we'll revisit it. We'll revisit it. We'll come back to it. We'll see how it's working. My problem is without that implementation plan, without the rubric. I mean, right now my son's writing a paper and he has 2 rubrics. He has the rubric that says Common Core at the top of it, and he has the rubric that was from the Fairfield Public Schools. And they are extremely different than each other. And there's a lot more in the Common Core rubric that he's looking at than the Fairfield Public Schools. So while I appreciate that, you know, I said to him, well, which one are we using? And he's like, I don't know. And so I really think that we need to stop and really start looking at the implementation plan in this process, because otherwise what we're doing is we're saying somewhere down the road, but that time never seems to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public that wish to address the board on this issue? Please state your name and address.
Julie Gottlieb, 153 Applegate Road. It is nice sitting here. I'm going to just speak to what's on the table, which is the vote to approve this. I would ask that you do approve this. I was also had the opportunity at Tomlinson, I have a 7th grader, to talked with the consortium and again with the LA focus group with Mr. Chiappetta and Ms. Boyce, so thank you for that. I will just say anecdotally, I have, as I said, a 7th grader, and I started asking a lot more questions as this curriculum came up for discussion and vote. I know he's been reading a book, Common, because I've heard him, excuse the expression, bitch and moan about it for months because he doesn't like it. But that's good, because we talked about why he didn't like it, and he's been talking with his group. One of the reasons I was late to this meeting this evening is because we went over his LA packet, and it's as you all know, several months worth of his writing, talking about the loathed book. And what I did notice was that he did have very hardcore comments and instructions from his teacher as to what he needed to work on, what was going well. There was also, he was able to speak about his peer group, which I thought was also I think that's good input. I would not want to see all one or all the other, but I did get the feeling that he is getting that blended experience, and I was very comfortable and very confident in this. I think what you are looking at in terms of the vote this evening is an extremely good, robust curriculum, and I would ask you to support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see anybody else standing up, so back to the board. Are we ready for action, or is there any final comments that board members wish to make? The motion maker wishes to make a final comment.
Okay. As a final comment, first, I was remiss. I thank Dr. Boyce and I thank Mr. Chiappetta for their presentation, but I also see that there are many staff members, middle school staff members who are here, and I thank them for coming in their support, because while I haven't been the biggest fan of the curriculum as it's presently evidenced, I know that my middle schoolers have received a wonderful education because of the teachers that we have. My 8th grader revels in her language arts teacher. My 7th grader thoroughly enjoys the subject, and so that regardless of the curriculum, their hard work in the classroom has just paid off dividends, and it's up to me with Christmas presents of Pride and Prejudice and Uncle Tom's Cabin to fill in what I felt was a blank, and which I now know for future middle schoolers is being addressed with this curriculum. Mr. Chiappetta and I had spoken about reading lists to one of the public comments, and he agreed, as we discussed it, that it would be a very good idea for teachers in the fall as part of the open house process to publicize those lists of expected books for their children, and that, we agreed that as a level of communication, it would be great from the teacher point of view and invaluable for the parents as the recipients of that. I haven't heard one concern expressed tonight that I don't feel this curriculum, whether explicitly or in the comments of staff, that it haven't been addressed. There are criticisms out there, and that's exactly why I so enthusiastically support this, is that I feel that they have been addressed, from the grammar to the vocabulary to the literature. The issue of consistency, Dr. Boyce explicitly referenced that she has heard that loud and clear, and it is something she is aware of and will take with her into the supervision of next year with all of her staff. And so I just repeat again that it is with great enthusiasm that I support this.
Go ahead, Mr. Llewellyn.
Thank you. To back up and clarify, I think, one of the things that was said by some of the parents, and I was saying earlier as well, is, it was probably more eloquently said by Ms. Miska, about revisiting. We talk about revisiting. I think we need to revisit. I think that as of next fall, when we all reconvene, the ELA for the elementary will have been in place for quite some time. I think it should be on the September agenda to get feedback on how that's gone. I know other board members have asked for it, but it hasn't occurred. We've had no presentations as to how the rollout of these new curriculum have been successful, and I think that would help alleviate concerns as well. The other thing I wanted to clarify is we've had some of the most fabulous English teachers as well, but the point I'm trying to make is we're being asked to approve something that has no metrics, no measurement, and what you've heard, I think, from various people is we don't necessarily have that consistency. And without that rubric there ahead of time, I don't see the rush to approve this.
If there are no final comments, I'll make one comment and then we'll go to vote. One, I'd like to add my thanks to the various staff for their hard work over the past year, their presentations, their responsiveness. There is honest debate on a lot of different educational issues, and I hope that you don't take the debate at the board table as not supportive of your work. Actually, I hope that you take the debate at the board table as saying, we're a very engaged board in the central reason we're in business, and that's the academic success of our students. And so I thank you for all of your responsiveness to the various debates and questions and comments and research. Further comments? None, so I will entertain the motion, and the motion on the table is that the Board of Education approve the English Language Arts grades 6 to 12 curriculum. All in favor, please raise your hand. Mr. Convertito, you are raising your hand. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Mrs. Lou McCormick, Mr. Convertito, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Fattabine, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, Mr. Patton, all opposed. Mr. Llewellyn, the motion passes 7 to 1 based on the attendance at the meeting at the moment. Thank you very much.
I would like to add my thanks to the staff and the parents who participated, gave us valuable feedback, and the board members who participated, who asked good questions. And I think that we look forward to the implementation of this and all the other curriculum documents. And I think it's, it's been a big year in curriculum with this board. The one thing the board can't say is we didn't spend enough time talking about curriculum and instruction. We've received and you approved a whole department's worth of business curriculum, if you remember, not that long ago. It seems like forever ago, maybe. We finished off the last part, the upper grade courses, the most challenging courses in our high school math program, along with some new textbooks, and now grades 6 to 12 in English Language Arts, and then last one to go next time. So I'm really proud of the work our group has done and proud of the support from the board on all of these curriculum revisions that have been brought forward this year. Thank you.
Just before we move to the other agenda, you've all been looking at me, but I've noticed that one of our RTM members, Mr. Wolk, happened to come in with a tray of something that he put in the back. So if any of those goodies are still there, please avail yourself of his courtesy. The next item on the agenda, with unanimous consent from the board, I'll move this to the June 24th agenda. We just heard from the state regarding their approval of the teacher evaluation plan, and they made some subtle changes, but the state requires that any changes to the document must then go back to the evaluation committee that is put together from the bargaining units and other various staff members. And so because it just arrived today, it has to go back to that committee so that they can discuss it, bless it, if they choose to, and then come back to our board for action on June 24th. So that's the status of it at the moment. Mrs. Maxon Kennelly.
Through the chair to Mrs. Leffert, does that mean, because I have a lot of paper up here, that we should throw out the one that we have because the new one will come? Okay.
Don't do that. There's just minor changes. They've approved everything. They were very excited about some of the changes we made to our plan. So what you have is fine. I will send out a new document. Honestly, I think it's going to be a few paragraphs that we just have to add. They wanted us to clarify a certain section, so it'll be small. Okay?
Okay, so hold on to that document, and as is our custom to save a few trees out there, we don't put it in the packet on June 24th. We rely on you to bring it back with you and then have the memo that Ann references as the supplement to those, to the main
Yeah,
document.
I'll just do a supplement for that piece. Thank you.
Okay. So, we now have the agenda item regarding the bargaining unit. The recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve the agreement between Bargaining Unit Fairfield Association of Educational Office Professionals, FAEOP, and the Fairfield Board of Education for the period July 1, 2013 through June 30th, 2016. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Gerber, seconded by Mr. Convertito. We had a discussion on this within executive session. Is the board ready to act? This is a personnel matter, and so we have not normally taken public comment on contracts. Is the board ready to act? I see no hands going up. Okay, all in favor, please raise your hand. Mr. Convertito, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Fattabine, Mrs. Maxon Cannelli, Mr. Patton. All opposed? Mrs. Lou McCormick. Abstentions? Mr. Llewellyn. 7, 1, and 1. It passes. 6, 1, and 1. Thank you. On to approval of the minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes, the May 6th, the May 15th, and the May 20th meetings, so I'll take them in order. The recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the regular meeting of May 6th, 2014. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Gerber, seconded by Mrs. Maxon Cannelli. Any discussion by the board members?
I had a proposed amendment
Please.
to the May 6th.
Yeah, you need to say, yes, I have discussion and I want to make an amendment.
Okay. Yes. I'd like to amend.
And can you clarify what the amendment is? Is there a document in front of us that represents that, or do you have?
There are actually 2 separate motions. I think it was presented and handed out.
Okay, so first, that's what I'm asking is, do you have 2 separate motions you wish to make?
Motions, yes.
So which one do you wish to make first?
We'll do the top one first for the
And-
ELA
And
presentation.
let me make sure I understand which the top one is. Are you talking about
It's only the front page.
just the front page?
Yeah, the back
Okay,
pages are for
so
reference.
please make a motion to amend the minutes to incorporate the proposed revision to the minutes ELA presentation time 1:12, correct?
Can we just have the document labeled for reference purposes?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Why don't we say Amendment 1?
Okay.
That the top page is amendment number 1, that it reads proposed revision to the minutes.
It's just it's the ELA
ELA presentation
presentation.
time
That's the
1:12.
one. ELA presentation is the first amendment.
And which paragraph are you talking about?
It is the conversation between Mr. Fattabine and Mr. Chiappetta.
That's the only one that is part of Amendment 1.
Correct, for the ELA presentation.
So then I think your motion would be to amend the minutes to incorporate the 2 paragraphs on the and call it Amendment 1.
Correct.
On the document page that reads ELA presentation time 1:12.
Correct.
Does that clarify it for you, Mr. Convertito? Okay. Is the board clear on that as the motion? Is there a second to that motion? Mr. Llewellyn. So now that the motion's on the table, make your case.
Okay, so the literal transcription of the conversation is on the following 2 pages, so you can see the bolded and underlined section between Mr. Fattabine and Mr. Chiappetta. And rather than do the literal transcription, because it's a long paragraph that Mr. Chiappetta noted, instead I made an attempt to appropriately summarize by just lifting several sentences. Do I need to read it, or I can read it for the benefit of
Board
the...
members, it's in front of you. Do you need Mrs. Lou McCormick to read it? If not, no, you don't have to read it. It's those 2 paragraphs that say, I'll say Fattabine, but it's Mr. Fattabine and Mr. Chiappetta.
Correct. It was regarding the workshop model and the response, in fact, that the district has never really implemented a true workshop model.
You wish this to be added to the minutes?
Correct.
Mr. Llewellyn, you seconded it?
I second it.
Okay, so any conversation from the board members? Mrs. Maxon Cannelli?
Through the chair to Mrs. Lou McCormick, I guess my first question is why this, as opposed to everything else that happened in the course of that meeting? Why is only this what you're pulling out?
Oh, as you may or may not have noticed, I'm very interested in the instructional method and the discussion about the workshop model. And so these 2 topics were omitted, and I felt that they were very important to have reference in the future that we've had this discussion regarding the workshop model. That's why.
Okay, and I appreciate the tremendous amount of work you did doing this, because I know this was the meeting there was no tape of,
That's
correct?
right, it's an audio.
I don't envy you what you had to do to pull this together, so thank you for providing the background material. That said, I have to be consistent with what I've said since the December meeting, which is to pick the words of individual members and to choose to put, I mean, Mr. Fadbean, in fact, is on here verbatim, I believe, with this amendment. I think that's not what these minutes are supposed to do. The point of that new bylaw change, I think the emphasis and the intent of the board was on an abstract, and I don't see how this in any way fulfills the idea of an abstract. And again, more to the point, we need consistent minutes, and my vote all along has always consistently been, we don't attempt to replicate a transcript. And while I absolutely appreciate that this is an abbreviated version, it's still far more akin to a transcript than it would be to anything that I envision as an abstract. And that only would be the reason that I would not support this.
Other comments that board members wish to make? Is there anybody else, Mr. Llewellyn, nobody else wishes to speak, so it's your turn.
I also believe that the change to the bylaws were to capture the essence, whatever you want to call it, the essence of our conversation. And there's no reference. Okay, what was the exact word?
Abstract.
So
Moved to
this is
abstract.
an abstract of our conversation. Whether it be a direct quote or not, it is an abbreviated version, and there's no reference to the question and exchange in the minutes. Therefore, the minutes do not reflect the conversation that occurred. I believe what Ms. Lou McCormick is asking is to have some memorialization of that conversation. If you would like to propose other wording, that would be fine, but we shouldn't be having this debate at every meeting. You know, we amended the bylaws so that they would reflect conversation. We can nitpick words as to whether it's an abstract or an essence, but at the end of the day, the whole concept that was discussed here has been omitted.
Let's see, we have two other board members, Mr. Patton and then Mrs. Gerber.
Without sounding like a broken record at every meeting with this, yes, we voted to change bylaws to hopefully adjust how minutes were done so that board members would be happy. But again, an abstract is a summary, and the summary of a presentation was in here, and this is a snippet of one aspect of one conversation of a presentation. So if we're not going to write a book and put Mr. Chiappetta's entire 50-page presentation in the minutes, then we can't have things like this in there. Minutes are summaries. I'm getting to be done with this type of conversation, and I'm not going to support it.
Mrs. Gerber.
Yeah, I'm not going to support this either. And just for clarification, these minutes were actually written before the bylaw change. They were sent to board members on May 14th. We had our bylaw meeting on May 15th. May 14th, I asked the board if they had any questions or comments, that they please get back to me. I heard nothing. We were supposed to have approved these minutes on May 20th. Up until about 11:30 on May 20th, it was still on the agenda until we chose to move it to tonight's meeting. Again, I heard nothing for another 2 weeks until this past, I think it was Thursday, when Mrs. Lou McCormick requested a transcript, which actually doesn't exist. Then she requested an audio, and she received it the next day. Again, nothing until this morning, when I received first the full transcript that Mrs. Lou McCormick had worked on, then the revisions. I mean, this is more than we need to do. If Mrs. Lou McCormick at some point over the past 4 weeks had said, I would like to have a comment about me, asking about the workshop model or something like that, that would have been more in keeping with the rest of these minutes, then that's up to the board to decide. But to have these really lengthy exchanges when the rest of the minutes are not lengthy exchanges, I think creates a very slippery slope where we could end up with 20, 30, 40-page minutes if everyone says, well, why can't we do it here? So I just think it's not really the direction we want to be going in. Hopefully these new types of minutes, starting with the May 15th minutes, will maybe change or improve that. But that's my take on this.
As you might, Mrs. Lou McCormick, as you might know, I have long held that the minutes should be what we did, not what we've said. And so it's not the accurate reflection of it, which I know this is, but it's to be consistent for the last 3 years. So I won't be supporting it. Mr. Convertito, you raised your hand?
Through the chair.
Mr. Fatterbean.
Through the chair to Mr. Fatterbean. Do the current minutes it's your conversation. Is it accurately represented in the minutes or is it not?
The current minutes.
I don't think this portion of the conversation don't appear to be in the minutes. That's the whole issue. The only question should be, is it the essence, or is it an abstract that is accurate? My whole problem with the minutes are that it has to be an accurate representation of what transpired on the board, because our written minutes are the only record that is maintained for any length of time. The state statute does not require audio transcripts to be maintained for any substantial length of time. The written record does have to be maintained for a substantial length of time. So the belief that the record, the official record and the minutes of a body don't have to necessarily incorporate everything, but what is, it should incorporate what the members wanted to incorporate, and also should be an accurate portrayal of what discussions occurred. Whether you like the content of that discussion or not is not the deciding factor. The question is whether they occurred. And if they occurred and are appropriate, I see no problem with incorporating them and putting them in the minutes there, because that is in fact what had happened. It's not a debate on whether you agree with the comment or disagree with the comment.
And I don't mean to be rude, but I asked one question. You get your chance to comment when I'm done with mine, okay? Through the chair, does the amendment number 1 accurately reflect that, or is there a different wording you'd prefer?
Through the chair to Mr. Fattabine.
Through the
is that
chair
what
to
you're
Mr.
saying?
Fattabine.
It appears to accurately reflect, based on the transcript that is included,
To the
the
best
abstract or the essence of the conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Fattabine.
Okay. Mrs. Maxon Cannelli, and then can we act on the minutes? Because we do have a executive session after this.
The minutes state, Mr. Chiappetta stated that the district uses some elements of the workshop model. I would like to go back and add my emphasis, some elements of the workshop method that have proven effective. There. We don't need to know that Mr. Fattabine asked the question. That is not relevant to the piece of information, and it's a clear indication that it was a topic of conversation. It's a clear indication that we're not using all elements. Anyone wanting further information could seek that out. But again, why aren't my words verbatim in here? That's where you can start arguing censorship. This piece of information is here. It reflects the essence of Mr. Chiappetta's entire part. That's all.
That's okay. Can we act on this so that we can move on, and because we do have an important meeting after this? This is Lou McCormick. No,
Can I comment?
yeah, please.
Oh, okay.
I
I included
recognize you.
both because oftentimes the answer is relevant because you want to know what the answer is answering. You need the question so that you can understand the response. If there's a preference to changing the verbiage to better reflect as an abstract, I am happy. You see the actual wording that happened. I tried my best. If you would like different wording, I welcome that. I did not feel it my obligation to try to include in the minutes everybody's comments. I felt that I only wanted to include this particular topic because I feel this topic is very, very important. It's important to me, and that's why I selected it. If there are other items that you would like to add to it, you are welcome to, and I would support you in transcribing them and creating an abstract.
Thank you. There are no further comments. If we're ready to act on the motion, and the motion is to add the 2 paragraphs that are on the front page titled ELA Presentation Time 112 as the first amendment, the first 2 paragraphs. Everybody understand the motion that's in front of us? If,
Is there a place to insert it, or are we just attacking it at the end?
You can attach it.
It's part of the ELA presentation dialogue, which was not included.
could you reference the paragraph it should follow so that we can put it in the right place?
It was after the board discussion followed on recommended required standardized reading during the board discussion. So
after
it could
the
be
word-
anywhere, really.
After the word variety that's in the minutes is where you would put these 2 paragraphs.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine.
Does the secretary understand where she wishes to have it? Any other questions? If not, all in favor of the amendment to the minutes to add these 2 paragraphs, please raise your hand. Mrs. Lou McCormick, Mr. Convertito, Mr. Fattabine, Mr. Llewellyn. I apologize deeply.
If you'd prefer to have her sit here.
You want to trade places? No, I'm sorry. All opposed? Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mrs. Maxon Kennelly, and Mr. Patton. The motion fails 4-4. You have a second amendment that you wish to make?
Do.
And when you make the motion, indicate where in the minutes that you want so that we answer
Okay.
Mr. Convertito's
This would be at
question in
the
advance.
end of discussion, so it would be, yeah. It would be before Mr. Dwyer requested and received unanimous
So
consent to move
after
forward.
the paragraph that
Before
ends
that.
with "to the meeting on May 20th."
Correct.
You would add these 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs.
Correct.
Okay, so please make the motion accordingly.
Okay. So I make the motion to add the abstract of the open comment that I made. Again, regarding the discussion of content and delivery, regarding workshop model, as well as just in general the importance of understanding.
entire motion?
What
is that
you're making
your
argument.
entire-
I'm sorry.
If you
that's my
could just make a
discussion.
motion first.
I make a motion to include the open comment discussion, the paragraphs with Lou McCormick, Dwyer, Lou McCormick.
How about
After
the
that, May
motion is
20th.
that you wish to add the 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs under the open comment 145 to be placed in the minutes following the meeting on May 20th?
Correct.
Okay?
Yeah.
Is that, you got that? Is there a second to that motion? Mr. Llewellyn? So make your argument.
Same argument. It was my open comment, and it was omitted. And I would like it in the record that, in fact, the discussion occurred, because as we know, we can try to rewrite history, but I don't think it's right. We're all here. We all know it happened. And just because we vote to say that it didn't happen doesn't mean that it didn't happen, and I would like it in the record that, in fact, the conversation happened.
Thank you. Mr. Llewellyn, you seconded the motion?
I'll defer.
That's your comment? Okay. And I'll unfortunately repeat my comment. It's not that any of this didn't happen. It's to what level of detail should be in the minutes and whatnot. So I am a less is more person and have consistently held that opinion for the 3 years that I'm here, and that's still my opinion. Other board members wish to make comments? Other board members wish to make comments? Do you have any final comments that you wish to make?
Yes. I think less is more is different than complete omission. Less is more makes reference to that the event actually occurs. So if you'd like to abbreviate my abstract, I would welcome that. However, the complete omission makes it seem as if it never happened, and I think that that is just not right from the point of the minutes are supposed to keep history of what actually transpired.
Thank you. Final comments? If not, I'm sorry, Mr. Convertito, followed by Mrs. Gerber.
I don't know how or when this debate is going to end, and I go back and forth on it because a total omission of a conversation is one thing, a synopsis of it is another, and I'm going to abstain from this vote, and I'm not going to vote to approve the minutes, okay, because the minutes have to reflect conversations that board people have, especially when they're talking to administration or about an issue that they feel passionate about, okay? And this, I don't think, is an abstract. I think this is a little bit more than that. But this board has got to come to some consensus on what we're doing here, or we're just wasting another half hour of public's time.
Hire a transcription service. Get it over with.
If there's no further discussion, I'm sorry, Mrs. Gerber, you did raise your hand.
Yeah, I guess just to repeat myself from the last time, the board has had these minutes since May 14th. I would have been happy to have gotten not this full type of transcript, but if Mrs. Lou McCormick felt that her words were not accurately or not represented at all in terms of something that she wanted to do, she had 4 weeks to send an email to me saying, I would like to make an amendment to add in, I discuss the importance of curriculum and instructional method. There were many opportunities to do that, and it's frustrating to me because we have board members who make it explicitly clear that they expect to get ample time to prepare for things. They ask that of Dr. Title, of Mr. Dwyer, of Dr. Title's staff. And I don't understand how in the past 4 weeks, someone who had an issue with these minutes could not have contacted me to let me know.
If there are no, Mr. Fattabine. Mr.
I don't wanna-
Llewellyn, followed by Mrs.
I don't want to get into debate here, but I have to comment on that respect. I had sent an email to the secretary suggesting changes in the minutes of a previous minute, and was told in the reply, it's up to the whole board. And then it came back to the whole board and was subsequently defeated. So the belief that you can submit a requested change of minutes and have that incorporated in the minutes is not necessarily true. It didn't happen to me in one instance, and to represent today that that would happen for someone else may or may not be, I don't know, it may be. It didn't happen to me. That's all I know.
Mr. Llewellyn, Mrs. Lou McCormick, followed by Mrs. Maxon Connelly.
I think Mr. Fattabine said what I was going to say. I'm not sure if we've ever actually had minutes, had information added to minutes, but I know I, on several occasions, have also submitted on a timely basis and had them not added. So I don't think that's an accurate statement as well.
Mrs. Lou McCormick.
And in my defense, this particular instance required a lot of time, continuous time, for me to transcribe this. And so I did my best. I requested the audio in the beginning of the week, and I needed to find time. I had to do it literally at like 12 or 1 a.m. in the morning to find 2 or 3 hours straight that I could sit and press play for 5 seconds at a time to type, and then hit pause, and then hit play, and pause, because we didn't record it, and there was no transcript. So I took the time, which was quite onerous, to provide you with a transcript so that you could compare my abstract. And I'm even open to you critiquing my abstract to provide something that is more to your liking, so long as that it is reflective of what is discussed. I just want the item noted for history. That's a simple request. We talk about this over and over again. I don't understand why this is an issue for the board. You don't have to like what I said, but it was said and it should be noted.
Thank you. Mrs. Maxon Connelly.
I do take issue with what Mr. Fattabine said, in that just submitting something is not an automatic pass into the minutes. Where there is a judgment call, I actually appreciate Mrs. Gerber's discretion in saying this wasn't a judgment call for her. And the fact that the amendment was then voted down showed that she exercised good judgment in that case. Outright omission, I mean, I certainly think that when minutes are suggested, if there has been outright omission, and those are things that can be taken care of ahead of time. That is the purpose of our getting those minutes, in this case, a full month ago. But to assume, for any board member to assume that by virtue of submitting an amendment, it is going to be acted upon, when clearly we are dealing with some gray areas here, no one should leave this table operating under that assumption, because it shouldn't be the case. And where there is a judgment call, such as in the case of what Mr. Fattabine suggested, Mrs. Gerber did exactly the right judgment call, which is she didn't agree, but she wasn't about to say, at least I assume that was the conversation, it wasn't for her to reject it. And so I believe we saw a copy of those emails in which Mrs. Gerber advised Mr. Fattabine this was a matter for the board to decide. It was not her judgment call. It was not her issue of censorship or not. That was for the board to decide what the intent of the minutes was, and that is what she fulfilled, and our vote records a very clear
Can I
reaction to
redirect the
that.
conversation back to the specific amendment that is in front of us?
And I would like, as one final comment, I don't recall this being part of open board comment, but in terms of this being situated on the minutes, where right now, please note, everyone, on page 6, open board comment, Mr. Patton thanked the public for their support during the budget process. Mr. Dwyer thanked the parents who also spoke on behalf of town services. And that is where this amendment is going to go, is utterly, wildly out of whack with what these minutes are supposed to be doing. My suggestion, if Mrs. Lou McCormick would accept a friendly amendment, would be something to the effect of, Mrs. Lou McCormick questioned curriculum's content and delivery, and specifically the workshop model. That would be consistent with these minutes, and otherwise, let's go back and get the transcript on everybody else. Why should everybody else be censored? We should be wanting to capture everyone's conversation, not just our own.
Mr. Fattabine, can I ask you to make the final comment?
I'll make a final comment.
Please.
The problem with the minutes is they have become politicized. That's the problem with the minutes. It's become a political issue, which the minutes shouldn't be. The minutes should only be an accurate record. The only debate should be is an accurate record, not what is
Mrs.
included in the
McIntyre.
minutes. That's it's my a fundamental problem in the fairness of this whole situation. That is the problem here. There's no problem with the way the minutes are drafted per se. There's no problem with whether a member wants to include something in the minutes or not. Generally, the courtesy, if a member wanted to include something in the minutes and it was accurate, it was extended to that member. It was important enough to them that they wanted it to be on the record. But it has become a political issue now. It's become a political issue of the majority of the board wanting to control the minutes and dictate what is in the minutes and what isn't in the minutes. That's the real problem here. And that's not going to be solved till the political issue changes.
So I will object to your saying it's a political issue. There is a fundamental difference of viewpoint between some board members who believe Robert's Rules statement that says minutes should reflect action and not words. Probably the elected official who has spoken on that the most, who is no longer with us, Carl Dickman, used to say that all the time. And there are other members of this board who very clearly believe that the minutes should be more expansive than that. That's not a political issue. That is just a fundamental difference of viewpoint among board members, which I think is fair to have difference of viewpoints, that's all. So if we're ready to take action...
Actually, may I make one comment, please? Ms. Lou McCormick, would you like to accept the friendly amendment?
I don't know that she made a friendly amendment. She was talking.
I didn't do it in an official
And
wording.
so she may or may not wish to make it.
I am
I
happy
wouldn't
to...
put words in her mouth.
Fair enough. Rather than phrasing it as a question, I would make the friendly amendment that Mrs. Lou McCormick questioned curriculum's content and content and delivery, and specifically the workshop model.
Okay. Fine.
Now, of course, that's an amendment that the board has to accept. Is the board accepting that as a friendly amendment?
To be inserted, I do not, I will take your word on this from open board comment at time 1:45:15. I do not know if that came before Mr. Patton.
So between Mr.
or-
Patton and Mr. Dwyer?
Fine.
Okay.
Okay. Between those two comments.
Time is relevant.
I'm not sure exactly what the order was, but it's as good as any. Open board comment, Mr. Patton thanked...
That wasn't when it happened. It wasn't during open board comment. It was during the comment on the ELA curriculum.
The open comment doesn't mean open board
It
comment?
was after the May 20th. We talked about that.
Okay, so that
No.
phrase you wish to have... The open comment does not mean open board comment. That, for Mrs. Lou McCormick, means that was a open comment she made during the debate.
It would go under,
After the on May 20th.
Yeah.
Do you remember we
after the-
discussed
on
this?
page 3, prior to the meeting on May 20th. Okay?
I'm sorry, Mrs. Maxon Cannelli, could you please repeat that?
Mrs. Lou McCormick questioned curriculum's content and delivery, and specifically the workshop model.
Did you get that? Okay. And is the board willing to accept that as a friendly amendment? And if so, it becomes the amendment.
Yep.
Seeing no objection? Okay. Any other further comments? If not, all in
All
favor?
right, wait,
Oh,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
That completely changes my friendly. I thought this was open board comment, and Mrs. Lou McCormick had outright been left out of open board comment. How many of, I'd like to know, you heard the transcript, how many others of us commented at that time?
Mr. Convertito, myself, you, and I believe Mr. Patton.
Then I will be voting against this amendment, because then why are the rest of us being left out?
Are you making...
Why am I being
No, no, no.
discriminated against and censored?
Maxon Cannelli.
I don't know. Make a motion.
I don't know it, nor do I need to.
Mrs. Maxon Cannelli, are you making a friendly amendment or are you not?
It was already voted on and accepted.
No, I asked if there were any objections, and it appears as though Mrs. Maxon Cannelli is objecting to it as a friendly amendment. Do you wish it to be on the table to be acted on or not? Okay. We're back to the original amendment. Okay. Are we ready for action, please? All in favor of the amendment, which is to include after the a paragraph that ends with "to
May
the meeting on May 20th," the 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs that are following the open comment 145 period, and that would be considered amendment number 2. Is there clarity on what we're acting on? Okay. All in favor, raise your hand. Mrs. Lou McCormick, Mr. Fattabine, Mr. Llewellyn, all opposed? Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mrs. Maxon Cannelli, Mr. Patton, abstentions? Mr. Convertito. That fails for...
3, 4.
Yes, that adds up. Thank you. So, the motion is on the table as it was originally here, that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the regular meeting of May 6, 2014. No further discussion. All in favor, raise your hand. Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mrs. Maxon Cannelli, Mr. Patton, all opposed? Mrs. Lou McCormick, Mr. Fattabine, abstentions. Mr. Convertito, and we are missing a board member, so we have 4, 2, and 1.
Yes.
Yes, 4, 2, and 1, the minutes are approved. The next set is approval of the minutes of May 15th, that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the special meeting of May 15th. Do I have a motion? Mr. Patton, do I have a second? Mrs. Maxon Cannelli. Any conversation on the minutes of May 15th? If not, all in favor, please raise your hand. Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Fattabine, Mrs. Maxon Cannelli, Mr. Patton, all opposed? Abstentions? Mrs. Lou McCormick?
Did you vote? Oh, okay, sorry.
Yeah. 6-1, based on the members present at the moment. Approval of the minutes of May 20th, that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the regular meeting of May 20th, 2014. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Maxon Cannelli, Mrs. Gerber seconded it. Any questions on the minutes of May 20th? If there are no questions on the minutes of May 20th, all in favor, raise your hand. Mr. Convertito, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Fattabine, Mrs. Maxon Cannelli, Mr. Patton, all opposed? Abstentions? 1 abstention, 6-1, based on the members' attendance at the moment.
601.
Yeah, 6-0 and 1, sorry. So we're on to superintendent's report.
Sure. Want me to do it?
Do a short one, sure.
It's not that short.
Then take as much time as you need.
Well, depends how late we want to be here. Okay.
That's a loaded question.
No, if the board wanted to get to item 13, I would
Yeah.
forego this, but no.
But let me ask the question, does the board wish to move this to a future agenda item and
Well,
and then
I have a
go to committee
proposal.
liaison? Okay, you wish to make a proposal.
I'll skip 10. If you skip 11 and 12, we'll go right to 13.
What's the board's interest?
Through the chair to Dr. Title, is there anything in 10A and B that you can't submit to us in writing that wouldn't?
I can submit it in writing if you...
Do we wish to entertain either unanimous consent or a motion to postpone 10, 11, and 12 and move directly to 13? Mrs. Maxon Cannelli? What'd you say?
I will not consent to that.
You'll not, okay, so we would have to do it by motion.
Okay, I'll do it
Okay.
then.
Well, I agree.
No, no.
I won't consent to getting rid of, I would like to make a comment on racial imbalance.
Okay, so we will...
I don't update on smarter balance, I can get in writing.
Okay.
That doesn't bother me.
So therefore, we'll get in writing, smarter balance, we'll make a comment on racial imbalance, and let's move on.
In open board comment, I'd like to make a comment.
Okay,
Well, then I might as well do the whole report.
yeah.
All right, I'll do the whole report. I have nothing to do tonight. The Smarter Balanced, as you know, was a big to-do this year because it was the first year, it was the field test, it was technology-based, it was a test of our ability to pull off the logistics involved, and thought that people might be interested in sort of generally how it went. I mean, it was obviously controversial in many different ways. Certain districts had some very serious issues with it. I'll just break this up into two parts. One is sort of at the elementary level, and then one at the secondary level. At the elementary level, we observed students were very engaged and worked very hard. In fact, some students commented that they worked harder on the Smarter Balance test than they did on the CMT. Teachers shared they were well trained and supported through the process. Students utilized the technology with ease. The login worked, the various tools that were on there, students were able to use. We had some concern that the typing skills of students, particularly at the elementary level, would be an issue. That appeared to be better than anticipated. I think there was some issue with, ensuring that kids do have some of the technological abilities, such as copying and pasting from the scratch pad to the test. On the test, you'd go to the scratch pad, you had to copy and paste it in, and for elementary kids, that was difficult for some. So that's a good learning point for us in terms of going forward. Students commented they really enjoyed the content and the topics included in the questions. Some of them even went to the library to look up more about some of the topics. I doubt that ever happened on the CMT. Students actually completed the test in less time than scheduled. I think that was just generally true, although there were always some students that took longer than anticipated. The testing window was very long. To get this in over a period of time really, took a lot of energy because of the number of kids and the number of computers that were tied up for it. We really need to we used one lab at the elementary schools to do it, and that really was insufficient. We really need to use a second lab next year. We are acquiring some additional technology, but that's something we really have to look into because that just stretches things out. The audio capabilities didn't work all that well. Sometimes we'd have to reboot the computer. So there were some of these technical glitches, but we are going to look at modifying the schedule, and we also need to get better clarification on the accommodations available for students with special needs on this. That's another issue that the state gave us very late guidance on that, and it drove many people crazy, particularly Ms. Leonardi. At the secondary level, the technology went pretty well. We did observe that it worked better on the desktop computers than on the laptop computers. So I really want to try wherever we can to give this test on desktop computers. The SBAC help test did respond, and the website never crashed. We were all worried this whole thing was just going to crash from overuse. Certainly more computers would help. I mean, we have a lot of computers in the district, but if you think about the middle school testing and trying to run 900 kids through this thing, because the middle school, all 3 grades are tested. The high school, you're just testing 11th grade. That's very, very difficult. So the carts with the tablets will help, and then we'll use more computer labs for the tests at the middle school. The middle school students took the testing seriously. They were focused. They did their best. Some students did take extra time. Students who were absent did do some makeup testing, and we don't know if we met the 95% participation rate, but we think we're pretty close all the way through on this. 11th grade is the place where we really thought we'd have the most trouble, and both high schools had participation rates between 85 and 90% on the 11th grade test. I did some proctoring. I know Mrs. Parks did, Dr. Boyce did as well, and I think students' engagement with the test ranged, and it depended on whether they were doing English or math, but there were a lot of kids trying very hard. There were also kids that logged on, did a few things, logged off, and that was the end of it. As you would not expect anything less from a variety of students in the 11th grade who were really excited about this. I think it was a good idea to give the test after the AP tests. We had originally scheduled that earlier. A lot of the resistance among the juniors was that was going to conflict with AP, and by moving it to after AP, I think that relieved a lot of the concerns. They did find, as the students we talked to, that compared to the CAP, they actually thought that the SBAC tests were more interesting, articles were more relevant, and perhaps actually seemed a bit easier, although clearly there were kids in the math who had not had the math that was on the test, and they were completely lost and basically weren't able to do it. Students reported the directions on the SBAC were very complex, and they required more critical thinking about the tasks than CAP, particularly on math, where students reported the tasks were complex and required much more problem solving and logical reasoning and explanation than the CAP had. I will really have to give credit to the administration of both high schools for really working hard with the students, and I think that Mr. Coyne had a great way of putting it, as explained to me. Sort of likened it to jury duty. You know, this is like your civic responsibility. It may not have direct consequences for you, but as a citizen, you are, being asked to participate in a field test of something that will ultimately benefit other people. And as distasteful as jury duty is, I think we all end up doing it at one point or another. And I think they went into all the classes and talked to the kids, and we know some kids goofed around on it. There's no question, but it worked out, reasonably well, and I just thought that people should know kind of how it went. It wasn't perfect. Lessons are learned. I think that's one of the reasons we decided to give it, and we'll be better prepared for next year.
Any quick questions on Smarter Balanced? And if not, you, of course, can always follow up.
One quick question. Earlier we heard that there might be some feedback from Smarter Balanced. Are they going to be giving feedback? Because I thought at one point they weren't, then maybe they are?
That's a moving target.
It's a moving
That's
target.
an
Thank
excellent
you.
question. Way back in the beginning, they were going to be giving us robust feedback. And then as the thing moved along, it became less and less. So at this point, we know that we will not get any feedback till probably January or February. So the time frame is much more elongated. And secondly, we don't know at what level of detail we're going to get feedback. So how's that for a non-answer? Because that's what they tell us from the state. I mean, it's a moving target. I'm sorry to say, and it's not just the state. The state's in a consortium with, I forget how many other, 25 states. It's a consortium-based test, and whatever is given to every other state is what Connecticut will get. I don't think Connecticut is really the driver of this. It's really the Smarter Balanced Consortium.
Okay, Mrs. Maxon Connelly.
Just very briefly, thank you for this report.
Yeah.
I think it's invaluable for the district to know that there was a value to what we did. The degree or not that the 11th graders took it seriously is irrelevant to me, because the administrators got to have a real run-through. And when our children are that degree in the lower grades, less stressed because they did it once, and now it's not this big unknown, is going to have a huge payoff for those kids, at least in one measure, and then it's just the material itself. And so I'm glad to know that we've learned something from this, and in that regard, it was a valuable exercise.
Okay, thank you. If you'll move on to the racial imbalance, and enclosure number 6 is in your packet.
Right. As you can see, this, although this letter is dated May 12th, it didn't come on May 12th. You can see it was received on June 2nd, so I don't want you thinking that we were keeping this from you. As you can see, on the flip side, the basic issue that we have, and we've always been hovering around the 25% absolute imbalance, is McKinley School. This past year, we were just under the number, and so we were okay. This year, it's ticked back up to 26.48%, which is, again, it's about 5 kids total. So we're back over the line. The good news is that if you read the letter from the state, they are not at this point asking us to change our plan. This is a plan that was approved about a year ago, and many times they've said that they want to see 2 to 3 years of it before they ask us to come back. So they may ask us to submit a revision to the plan next year, but really what that's talking about is they'll wait for 1 more year's worth of data.
see what it looks like in May of 2015, and if at that point it seems to be heading in the wrong direction, then at that point they may ask us to resubmit the plan. So we are able to stay the course on the current plan, because I think they realize that this is just a few kids either way, and you're going to bounce around in and out of it. If they start to see a pattern, I think they're going to be a little more concerned. So that's where we are with that.
Okay, questions on the racial imbalance?
Yeah, well, a comment about racial imbalance plan.
Comment.
And clearly, in a way, the racial imbalance plan that we implemented really has twofold purposes, it seems. One, providing pre-K, and the other trying to provide some avoiding racial isolation, the imbalance within McKinley School. It appears that the second aspect of that plan may or may not be working because the racial imbalance increase. So I would submit that we really should look at both components of that plan and as to what effect the district has a benefit and a purpose for offering pre-K, and whether we should as a district offer pre-K or not offer pre-K in combination, and how it's going to be offered and to who it's going to be offered and in what conditions it's going to be offered, and in combination with maybe a different aspect of the racial imbalance plan that may or may not be more effective. But I do believe we need to have that discussion, and I am especially have difficulty philosophically with a public education system selectively, in essence, charging for a public service in pre-K, which is in essence becoming part of an elementary school education, although it's not officially, but it is in essence part of an elementary school education depending on how you define it, which is sometimes flexible. So I do have a problem with how pre-K is structured currently in the existing plan with the selective fee structure, and now, based on the recent budget changes, the selective busing and non-busing of pre-K students.
So I just want to comment on that on our process point. If the board wants to revise its racial imbalance plan, we can do that. If you want to, if you make an alteration in the pre-K, that's changing the racial imbalance plan, that then would have to go up to the state for approval. So the board can't just unilaterally change anything that's in the plan as submitted. If to do that, pass it, we trudge up to the state and explain how our new plan will do better than the old plan. So if the board wants to take that on, it's not required. We're going to take that on, that's what you're into. So it's not a matter of, well, we can now, just unload the pre-K part and do something else. We'd have to resubmit the plan to the state to do that.
I'm not sure that that's Mr. Fatabine's thought, but the part that what I think Mr. Fatabine's thought is, that I agree with, is that we have made good faith efforts, and the percentages have gone a little bit over 25, a little bit under 25, and over and under for the last 2 or 3 years.
Right.
And if we project forward to next spring, if suddenly we get a letter from the state next spring, I think Mr. Fatabine is just suggesting that maybe we have to look at something that is not going to just cause us to revisit this issue every 2 years.
Right.
And that's a difficult conversation, but it's some that at some point the board may have to address.
I mean, you can change the fee thing. I mean, if your concerns about the fees, that can be adjusted. You wouldn't have to go back to the state for that. So if that's the element, I'll just say that if the board wants to attack and revise the racial imbalance plan, then that should be your one and only board goal for next year, because that will take all year. You might as well clear the deck, because anything else we're going to put on the table for this will be 1,000 times more explosive than what's sitting on here. So you can do that.
Yeah. I think the minutes ought to reflect that Dr. Title meant that it is going to be 1,000% more engaging to the community. Any other comments on the racial imbalance? Any other comments on the racial imbalance?
I'm done.
If not, committee liaison reports. Do we have anything for committee liaison reports? Hearing none, open board comment. Mr. Fatabine. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't, thank you for doing this because
That's all right. Just very briefly, Mr. Dwyer and I attended last night the awards assembly, the awards for PTA Council, which was nicely attended. Some very worthy faculty recipients, as well as 2 PTA volunteers. And I hope it will get some write-up in the paper, because they certainly deserve that extra recognition. But it was a very nice ceremony last night.
Any other committee liaison reports? Seeing no shaking hands, on to open board comment. Mr. Fattabine, I think you said you wanted to make a comment specifically?
What I would have liked to have seen on the agenda was an update to the financial update, since we're getting close to the end of the fiscal year, and it's always been my concern that we net out the year with as zero balance as we have to. So I would like the assurance that we're going to do that.
Yeah, no, it is scheduled for the 24th meeting. The amount of items on the agenda at the moment, just, we had to bounce some things to the 24th.
Now, I'm pretty confident we're going to do it, but I like the reinforcement.
No, confident. If you remember at the last meeting, Dr. Title guaranteed it.
You guaranteed it?
Guaranteed it.
So.
Well, I couldn't get that at one of the meetings, but...
No, you couldn't.
No, that was earlier.
You couldn't get that from Mrs. Munsell in Dr. Title's absence.
Right.
Other open board comments, Mr. Patton, anything? Mr. Llewellyn, anything? Mrs. Maxon Cannelli? Mrs. Gerber? Mr. Convertito? Mrs. Lou McCormick? Okay, no open board comments. We are not adjourning the meeting just yet. We are going back into executive session. For those members of the public who may want to sit around while we conduct item number 13, I will promise you that the only thing that we'll be doing is passing the motion that says this regular meeting of the Board of Education adjourns. So therefore, you're welcome to stay, but so that you know. Do I have a motion that the Board of Education convene to executive session for the purpose of superintendent evaluation?
Motion to suspend the rules, because if we're going to go into executive
Yes.
session, the motion to suspend the
To
rules has to be made in public.
Suspend the rules. Do I have a second? Mr. Patton, if there's no debate, all in favor, raise your hand. It's unanimous. Now the recommended motion that the Board of Ed, thank you for that, Mr. Convertito, that the Board of Education convene to executive session for the purpose of superintendent evaluation. Do I have a motion? Mrs. Gerber, second. Mr. Patton? No discussion. All in favor, raise your hand. It's unanimous. Okay, thank you very much.
I was going to say, can we have a 2-minute
bathroom break? Best if we do this back in my
Yeah, it's,
my conference.
it is, yes. This is back in the conference room, in the superintendent's conference room.